Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere colder, hungrier, and far more exhausting than anything you might imagine. We're stepping into the Korean peninsula during the early 1950s, a war zone that rarely makes it into polished Hollywood dramas, but defined an entire generation of young Americans who suddenly found themselves thousands of miles from home. Forget the clean uniforms, stirring speeches, and quick victories you've seen in the movies. The reality was mud, frostbite, exhaustion, and a constant fear that every ridged line hid something ready to kill you. You wouldn't last a day, not because you're weak, but because almost no one was built for the conditions they were thrown into. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to breathe out, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that low hum in the background. This isn't about adrenaline or action scenes. This is about the day-to-day grind of life as an American soldier in Korea. The monotony, the misery, the little humiliations stacked on top of each other until you're too numb to notice. By the time we're through, you'll see why surviving this war wasn't about heroics. It was about enduring one more hour, one more frozen night, one more march through hills that never seemed to end. So, tonight, you're not in your warm bed, you're not surrounded by comforts you take for granted, and you're definitely not safe. Congratulations, you've just woken up in Korea, 1950. The good news, you're alive. The bad news, so is the war. You open your eyes, and the first thing you feel is not comfort, not relief, not even a sense of place. It's cold. A deep, bone-cutting cold that slips under your jacket, through your blanket, and straight into your spine. The ground beneath you isn't a mattress or even a flat wooden floor. It's frozen dirt, packed hard by boots, pressed by your own weight, uneven enough to jab into your hips with every shift of your body. You've been lying in a shallow trench you scraped out yesterday, with a shovel that felt heavier with each passing hour. This isn't a bed, it's a hole. A foxhole, they call it, as if giving it an animal's name makes it sound clever instead of pathetic. It's your home now, and it already smells like wet wool, sweat and fear. There's no alarm clock, no soft radio chatter easing you into the morning. You wake because your toes ache so badly you thought they snapped off in the night. You kick your boots against each other to make sure they're still there, though the numbness makes you wonder if your feet have just given up. The air is raw, sharp, and heavy with smoke from last night's fire that burned out long before the cold gave up. Your breath hangs in front of your face like pale mist, proof you're still breathing, though barely. The sound that drags you the rest of the way into consciousness isn't the chirping of birds or the hum of a city. It's distant artillery, the kind of thump that makes the ground vibrate for half a second before settling into silence again. You'd think it would terrify you every time, but after weeks of it, it becomes like a grim lullaby. Explosions in the distance mean they're not right here, not yet. The silence between them is worse, because silence means you don't know where the next one lands. Around you, men stir in their own dugouts, layered in uniforms that were supposed to withstand winter, but feel like paper once the wind cuts through. Helmets sit tilted over their eyes, rifles leaned against the dirt walls. Everything damp from frost that settles in like it pays rent. Someone coughs, and the sound isn't sharp. It's hollow, wet, dragging, the kind of cough you hear over and over until you don't even notice anymore. That's the soundtrack of a soldier's morning in Korea. a chorus of hacking lungs, muttered curses, and the clink of metal as men fumble for gear in half-light. You try to stretch your legs, but the space is too cramped. You're curled up like a dog in a kennel, knees stiff, back screaming. You push yourself up, and the cold rushes in even stronger. Every muscle aches like you've been running all night, though all you did was shiver in place. You rub your eyes with gloves stiff from frozen sweat, and the dirt crumbles under your nails because nothing stays clean here. You gave up on that idea weeks ago. The smell hits next. Damp wool that never dries, boots crusted with mud, and the faint, sour odour of last night's sea ration tin discarded somewhere nearby. Everything you touch feels greasy, like a thin layer of grime coats the world, and there's no escaping it. Soap is a rumour. Baths are fantasy. You've been wearing the same undershirt so long that it stiffens when you peel it away from your chest, but you don't dare remove it completely. Bare skin is a death sentence in this weather. You shift and notice your canteen, half empty, the water inside tasting faintly of metal. You take a sip anyway, because your mouth feels like it's lined with dust. The liquid is ice cold, nearly frozen, burning your throat on the way down. You swallow quickly, because if you linger on the taste, you'll remember how many times you've refilled it from streams that probably carried more diseases than fish. You don't think about it. You can't. Thinking leads to fear, and fear wastes energy. You don't have any to spare. As the dim morning light seeps into the sky, you catch sight of the hills surrounding you. They're steep, jagged and bare, like teeth rising out of the earth. The soil is dry and crumbles under your hands when you climb, yet somehow it still manages to stick to everything you own. The hills never end. You march over one, only to find another, then another. Korea is not flat farmland or wide open plains. It's endless ridges, twisting valleys, and narrow paths where the enemy can hide in every fold. You don't know if the next ridge is empty or packed with rifles aimed down at you. That thought follows you into every morning like an unwelcome shadow. There's no privacy here. The hole you sleep in is also the hole you live in. Your rifle rests inches from your head, always close enough to grab if someone yells. Your buddy is in a foxhole just a few feet away, so close you hear him mutter in his sleep. If you need to relieve yourself, you stumble a short distance away, dig another hole in frozen ground, and pray you're not spotted while your pants are around your ankles. The cold is merciless then, biting harder than any bullet, but you've gotten used to humiliation. Everyone here has. When you finally force yourself upright, your joints pop like old hinges. Your knees feel older than you are. You're 20, maybe 21, but you move like a man twice that age. The weight of your pack sits heavy on your shoulders even before you put it on. You know what's inside. Extra ammunition, grenades, maybe a blanket if you're lucky, and whatever personal trinket you manage to hold onto from home. Some guys keep photographs tucked into their helmets. Others have letters they've read so many times the paper is falling apart. You carry them not because they help, but because they remind you there was once a world outside this frozen valley. The first words you hear from your sergeant aren't good morning. They're orders. Get moving. Pack up. Stay sharp. The war doesn't pause for breakfast or coffee, though you'll get both in a few minutes if you're lucky. What matters now is keeping the line, holding your position, and pretending you're not as cold and miserable as you feel. The men around you grunt, drag themselves upright, and start preparing. It's not glamorous. No one leaps up ready for action. It's more like dragging corpses back to life, slow and reluctant, because everyone knows the day ahead will be worse than the night behind. Some mornings are quiet, just the sound of boots crunching frost and men adjusting gear. Other mornings not so much. If the enemy decided to shell your position, you'd be scrambling for your helmet before you even opened your eyes. Dirt flying, ears ringing, heart pounding. You never know which version you're waking to. You only know you'll have to deal with it, because there's no choice. War doesn't care if you're tired, hungry, or wishing harder than anything to be home. You glance at your boots, laced tight, but already cracked at the seams. They're supposed to be durable, but weeks of mud, snow, and freezing rain have worn them down to little more than stiff leather cages. You wiggle your toes, or try to, and wonder how long before frostbite sets in. You've heard stories. Blackened skin, amputations, men screaming as medics sawed off dead flesh. You shove the thought away, but it lingers like smoke. Every morning you wake with your feet still attached feels like a small miracle. You force yourself to stand fully, stretching your back until it protests. Round you, others do the same. Some light cigarettes with shaking hands, the smoke curling into the cold air, momentary warmth against their lips. Cigarettes are everywhere, as common as rations, passed around like currency, shared as if they were gold. They don't taste good anymore. They just taste like routine, something to occupy your mouth and mind when there's nothing else. Your weapon is the next thing you check. Always. The rifle has been with you longer than your own shadow. You wipe frost off the barrel, clear dirt from the trigger guard, and run your hand along the stock. It's not clean. It hasn't been in weeks. But it works, and that's all that matters. You don't carry it because you want to. You carry it because without it, you're nothing but a body waiting to be buried in the hills. By now, your stomach growls, low and angry. You know what's coming. A tin can meal that barely counts as food. But before you get to that, you just stand there for a moment, letting the reality settle in. You're in Korea. It's 1950, and the day is just beginning. The worst part? You'll have to do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, until the war decides otherwise. The sound of boots crunching closer snaps you back. Orders barked again, men moving faster now. You bend down, sling your pack onto your aching shoulders, and grab your rifle. The sky is turning pale, the air sharp enough to sting your nose, and your breath comes out in clouds. This is morning. This is life. This is surviving one frozen sunrise at a time. And as you shuffle forward with the others, you're already thinking about the next misery waiting just beyond the horizon. The hole you dug yesterday isn't just a place to fight from. It's your bedroom, your living room, your kitchen, your bathroom, and your coffin in waiting. You crouch back down into it after the morning shuffle, and once again you're reminded of just how small it is. Just deep enough so that your helmet barely dips below ground level, just wide enough for you to curl up with your knees jammed against your chest. Comfort isn't the point here. Cover is. The idea is simple. Keep your body below the dirt, and maybe the next bullet whistles overhead instead of into your skull. The walls are rough and jagged, chunks of frozen mud that flake off when you brush them with your sleeve. They collapse a little more every time it rains, and in Korea it rains often. What begins as a neat rectangle of earth quickly becomes a soggy pit, ankle deep in water, smelling like rotting leaves and unwashed socks. You scoop it out with your helmet, dump it over the edge, and watch it slide right back in again. That's the rhythm. Dig, scoop, dump, repeat, until you're too exhausted to care that the water is now soaking through your trousers. The floor is a mess of ice, mud, and whatever refuse you've dropped over the last week. Empty ration cans with edges sharp enough to slice your hand open, cigarette butts mashed into the muck, bits of cloth torn from uniforms that snagged on rocks. The place looks less like a defensive position and more like a trash heap. It smells worse than it looks. Damp canvas, sweat-soaked wool, food gone sour in its tin, and the ever-present stench of men who haven't bathed in weeks. When you sink back into it, the odour clings to your nostrils until you almost tasted it. There's no furniture, of course. No chair, no table, no pillow. If you're lucky, you manage to scavenge a wooden crate, and that becomes your seat, your desk, and sometimes your shield against the wind. Most of the time, you sit directly on the dirt, your legs tucked up, your rifle balanced across your lap like a nervous pet. You shift constantly, trying to find a position that doesn't make your back ache, but after hours in the hole, every bone complains. You hear movement nearby, the other men in their own holes, muttering, coughing, sometimes laughing at jokes that wouldn't be funny anywhere else. The foxhole strips away privacy. You're never really alone, but you're always isolated. You can see the outline of your buddy in the next hole, his helmet barely peeking above the edge, but you don't talk much. Words waste energy, and you both know nothing you say will change the mud, the cold, or the shells overhead. When it rains, and it always rains, the foxhole turns into a bathtub. The sides slump inward, the bottom fills, and within an hour you're sitting in cold water up to your ankles. You bail it out, curse under your breath, and watch more trickle in. Your socks never dry. They cling to your skin, wet and clammy, until your toes wrinkle and blister. You've heard the warnings about trench foot, about skin rotting from too much moisture, but there's nothing you can do except wring out the fabric and shove your foot back into the boot. The hole doesn't care. It holds water like a sponge, and you're the one stuck in it. At night, the foxhole is worse. You huddle down, pull a blanket over your shoulders and try to sleep sitting up. The ground is too hard, too lumpy, too cold to lie flat. Every time you drift off, a sound snaps you awake. A rifle crack in the distance, the shuffle of boots, the metallic click of someone adjusting a bayonet. You jerk upright, heart pounding, and then realise it was nothing, or at least nothing for you. Sleep comes in stolen scraps, 20 minutes here, half an hour there, always shallow, never restful. By morning, you feel more dead than alive, but you crawl through another day anyway. The foxhole doesn't just house you. It houses everything you'd rather avoid. Rats scurry along the edges, their slick bodies vanishing into the mud as soon as you spot them. They gnaw at your food if you leave it unguarded. They chew the corners of your gear. Sometimes they don't wait for you to be asleep. You've woken before to the sharp scratch of claws against your boot or the quick dart of fur across your chest. You swat, curse, and they vanish, only to return the moment you stop paying attention. Insects thrive here too. Mosquitoes swarm in the summer, whining around your ears, biting any patch of exposed skin. Flies gather around discarded rations, buzzing endlessly, landing on your face when you're too tired to swat them away. Lice burrow into your clothes, multiplying in the seams until every inch of your body itches. You scratch until your skin bleeds, but the relief lasts seconds. There's no soap strong enough, no water clean enough, no chance of escape. You live with the crawling, just as you live with the mud. The rifle across your knees becomes part of the hole itself. You rest your hands on it out of habit, check the magazine, run your thumb along the safety. It's always there, just like the dirt, the cold, the stench. You know you'll have to lift it in a hurry someday, maybe today, maybe tomorrow when the shouting begins and the shells drop closer. The foxhole is supposed to protect you then. A shallow scrape in the earth is the only thing between you and death. You know it's not enough, but it's all you've got. You think about home sometimes as you sit in that pit, about real beds, about walls that keep out the wind, about floors that don't sink under your weight. You picture your kitchen, your bathroom, your living room. The foxhole mocks all of it. Here, everything is stripped to survival. You eat crouched in the dirt. You sleep in damp clothes. You relieve yourself just far enough away that the smell still carries back to your nose. Privacy, comfort, dignity, all gone. The hole erases them, swallows them into its mud. And yet the foxhole becomes familiar. You learn its corners, its edges, the way water pools in one side, the way a particular rock jabs your hip every time you sit. You grow attached to it in a strange way, because it's yours. The other men have theirs, and you have this one. You dug it, you cursed it, you patched its walls with whatever scraps you could find. It's miserable, but it's yours. When shells burst in the distance, you duck into it instinctively, trusting it to shield you from flying metal. When you return from a patrol, you sink into it with a weary sigh, like slipping back into bed, even though the bed is mud. The foxhole becomes home, not because it deserves to, but because there's nowhere else. Sometimes you hear whispers in the dark, stories about men falling asleep and never waking up because the cold claimed them right there in their holes. Other times, you hear about men buried alive when the walls collapsed under shellfire, their comrades too far away to dig them out in time. You don't know which fate is worse, freezing, suffocating, or being pulled out half alive, only to be sent back into another hole the next day. You try not to think about it, but at night, when the cold presses in and your breath fogs the air, the thoughts creep back in anyway. You scratch at your collar, adjust your helmet, and shift your weight. Your body protests every movement, stiff from sitting in one position too long. You stretch your legs, shake out your arms, and settle back down, because there's nowhere to go. The foxhole doesn't let you leave unless ordered. You live in it, wait in it, rot in it. Time stretches, the hours bleeding together until you don't know if it's been 1 day or 3. The hole doesn't mark time, it just swallows it. When the sun sets, the shadows stretch long across the hills, and your foxhole grows darker, colder, more claustrophobic. You grip your rifle a little tighter, eyes straining against the dim light, ears tuned to every rustle, every distant crack of a twig. You know the enemy is out there, just beyond the next ridge, maybe watching, maybe waiting. You don't see them, but you feel them. The foxhole offers no reassurance. It's just a ditch, a scar in the earth, holding you like a coffin lid cracked open. You pull your blanket tighter, exhale into your gloves, and remind yourself that morning will come again. Not warmth, not relief, just another morning, another day in the hole. And when you wake again, stiff and aching, surrounded by mud and stench, you'll remember that this isn't temporary. This is life now. The foxhole is home and the war is the landlord. You reach for your canteen, not because you expect refreshment, but because your mouth feels like it's lined with sandpaper. The first swallow of water tastes metallic, faintly sour, and slightly warmer than you'd like. It doesn't clean anything. It just shifts the grit around. You swish it in your cheeks, spit it into the mud, and for half a second you pretend that counts as brushing your teeth. Out here, it does. Dental care is a distant memory, tucked away with the things you took for granted back home, like running water, soap that lathered, or even a mirror. You rub your tongue against your teeth and feel the film that's built up over weeks. The taste never really goes away. Tobacco smoke, bad coffee, canned meat that refuses to die even after you've swallowed it. You chew gum when it's issued, hoping the sugar masks the flavour of neglect. But mostly it just adds another sticky layer on top of everything else. Cavities aren't a worry right now. Survival is. But the dull throb in your molars when the cold air hits them reminds you that even your teeth are staging a rebellion. The army tells you to shave, to keep a clean face. They hand you a razor, a small blunt piece of metal, and expect you to scrape it across your skin every morning. You try, crouching over your helmet filled with a few inches of water, but the blade pulls more than it cuts, dragging painfully over your jaw. The water's already dirty from the mud on your hands, and it smells faintly of rust from the helmet itself. You splash it on your cheeks anyway, because there's no alternative. Halfway through, the blade catches on your skin, leaving a shallow cut that bleeds into the grime. You dab at it with your sleeve, adding another stain to a shirt that hasn't been clean since you landed in this country. Bathing doesn't exist. At least, not in any recognisable sense. You wipe your face with a rag that smells worse than your sweat, rub at your armpits, and convince yourself you're freshened up. The truth is, you're just moving the dirt around. Showers are something you've only heard rumours about. Maybe when you're rotated back to a base camp weeks from now. Maybe never. Until then, your body is a patchwork of dried sweat, ground in mud, and layers of clothing you can't afford to remove. You scratch at your scalp, feeling the grit gather under your fingernails. Your hair hasn't been washed in weeks, maybe months, depending on how lucky you've been. It's oily, stiff, and crawling. Not metaphorically, literally crawling. Lice have set up permanent residence, laying eggs in the seams of your clothes and biting at your skin until the itch wakes you from shallow sleep. You scratch until your scalp burns, until your wrists are raw, and still it doesn't help. Everyone around you is the same. Men digging at their collars, swatting at their ankles, muttering curses at invisible tormentors. Hygiene isn't just forgotten, it's impossible. Your uniform clings to you, damp from sweat, stiff from dried mud. The smell is something between mildew and rotting meat. You pull at the collar, trying to shake it loose, but it sticks like a second skin. You know the condition of the other's clothes without looking. They're no better. The fabric stiffens, cracks and frays. Washing isn't an option. Even if you had soap, even if you had buckets of water, there's no time, no place, no energy. You keep wearing it, day after day, until it becomes part of you. Your boots, heavy and cracked, hold a real prize. Feet that haven't been dry since the last time you can remember. You peel off a sock just to check the damage, and the sight makes you gag. toes swollen, skin wrinkled and soft, patches of white that look like they're ready to peel away. You rub them quickly, blow into your hands to warm them, then shove everything back into the boot, praying you can delay the inevitable. Trenchfoot is waiting, lurking in the damp, ready to rot your flesh until it peels away in strips. Medics warn you, officers bark at you to keep your feet dry, but they might as well tell you to stop breathing. The mud doesn't care. The boots don't care. Your feet suffer in silence until they give out. There's the matter of relieving yourself too. Back home, the bathroom was a sanctuary. A place with walls, a door, maybe even a lock. Here it's humiliation. You grab a shovel, stumble just far enough from your foxhole to avoid the smell, and dig a shallow trench in ground so hard the blade bounces back. You squat, exposed to wind, snow, and the gaze of anyone who happens to look your way. Privacy is gone, stripped away by necessity. You finish quickly, cover it with a thin layer of dirt, and shuffle back. Hands freezing, trousers stiff from mud. The smell clings, following you even after you've buried the evidence. Wiping is another luxury you don't get. Paper isn't handed out. Toilet paper is rarer than gold. You improvise. Scraps of cloth, leaves if you're near trees, sometimes nothing at all. You learn to live with it, the discomfort, the itch, the raw skin. It's not about being clean. It's about being done quickly and getting back under cover before the next round of artillery lands too close. Your hands, when you glance at them, are cracked and blackened. Dirt packed into the creases, nails broken and jagged. You spit into your palm, rub it against the other, then wipe it on your trousers. That's the extent of washing before breakfast. You pick at the grime sometimes, scraping it away with the edge of your knife, but it always comes back. The earth here doesn't let go. It seeps into your pores, coats your skin, and stays. You start to wonder if you'll ever feel clean again, even if you make it home. Your breath smells foul, though no one mentions it. Everyone's does. The mix of cigarettes, canned meat, unbrushed teeth, and perpetual dehydration creates an odour that hangs in the air when men huddle together. You get used to it, the same way you get used to the mud, the lice, the damp clothes. It becomes background noise for your senses. You don't notice it until a rare breeze cuts through, carrying the stench away for a moment, only to return thicker, heavier, and more suffocating. Morning hygiene, if you can call it that, is less about getting clean and more about convincing yourself you've tried. A splash of water, a scrape of the razor, a few minutes of scratching and adjusting your uniform. That's all. There's no shower to look forward to. No sink waiting with warm water. No bar of soap to scrub away the night. You sit back in your hole, still filthy, still itching, still reeking, and you remind yourself that this is normal now. Clean is a fantasy, dirt is reality, and pretending otherwise is a waste of effort. The men around you don't comment. No one complains. There's nothing to complain about when everyone smells like the same mixture of rot and sweat. You watch one soldier run a comb through his hair, the teeth snapping against knots, pulling out more lice than strands. He shrugs, flicks them into the mud, and keeps going. Another tries to shave, cutting himself again and again until his chin looks like it's been attacked. He pats it with a filthy rag and goes back to it, as if the act matters more than the result. Hygiene becomes ritual, not improvement. A way to remind yourself you're human, even if you don't feel like one anymore. And just as you finish spitting into your helmet or wiping your hands on your trousers, the call comes down for breakfast. You grab your tin, drag yourself out of the hole, and shuffle toward another part of the misery, leaving behind the illusion of hygiene for the promise of food that tastes like tin and regret. Your stomach has been growling since you opened your eyes. Not in that casual way it does back home when you've skipped breakfast because you overslept. This is the hollow, gnawing kind of hunger that makes your body feel weak before you've even stood up. You drag yourself toward the supply area, where a few battered crates sit open, and a corporal is already handing out the day's meal like he's dealing cards no one wants. There's no sizzling bacon, no smell of fresh coffee wafting through the air. Instead, you're handed a tin, heavy in your palm, dented from its rough ride across the ocean and over dirt roads that barely exist. The label is half torn, the black letters stamped onto cheap metal, and you don't need to read it to know what's inside. See rations. Breakfast in the Korean War isn't a meal. It's a compromise, a punishment, wrapped in a thin layer of tin. You pry the lid open with the key soldered to the side. The metal screeches as it curls back, and a smell drifts out that is neither fresh nor inviting. Grease clings to the inside of the can, thick and congealed, a pale jelly that jiggles when you tip it. Sometimes it's beans and wieners, sometimes it's chopped ham and eggs, sometimes it's something so ambiguous the men just call it mystery meat. Whatever the label, it always looks the same. A greyish lump swimming in oily liquid, chunks settling at the bottom, fat hardening on the top. You hold it close to your nose, hesitate, and then dig in anyway. Hunger doesn't let you protest. The first bite is always the hardest. The texture is rubbery, the taste bland and salty, as if the only seasoning in the world is sodium and regret. You chew slowly, trying not to gag at the way the meat clings to your teeth. Someone nearby jokes about how even the rats won't touch this stuff unless they're desperate. You laugh, but it's true. Some of the tins are so foul even scavengers avoid them. If you're lucky, there's a small packet of crackers included, hard enough to chip a tooth. You bite into one, and it splinters like drywall, crumbs spilling into the mud. They taste like cardboard, dry enough to suck the last bit of moisture from your mouth, but they're a relief compared to the meat. At least they don't fight back when you chew. Then there's the instant coffee packet. A small envelope of brown powder you stir into whatever water you can heat. Most mornings it's lukewarm at best, tasting more like burnt dirt than coffee, but you drink it anyway. The caffeine jolts your system awake, however faintly, and for a few minutes your eyes stop drooping. Some men dump the powder straight into their mouths, chasing it with a gulp of water, too impatient to wait for it to dissolve. The bitterness makes their faces twist, but they smile afterward, grateful for any scrap of normalcy. The dessert, if you can call it that, is a chocolate disc so old it's turned chalky white. The sugar gives you a brief rush, but the aftertaste is waxy, lingering like a bad memory. You chew it anyway, imagining the candy bars waiting back home, shiny wrappers, sweet smells, the luxury of choice. Out here, dessert isn't pleasure. It's fuel, one more thing to cram down before your stomach growls again in 2 hours. You eat quickly, not because you're eager, but because the cold steals heat from everything. The grease in your tin stiffens within minutes, turning to a solid block you can't choke down if you wait too long, so you shovel it in, mouthful after mouthful, barely tasting by the end, just swallowing to get it over with. You scrape the last bits out with your spoon, lick the metal clean, and toss the empty tin aside, where it clatters against a pile of others. The sound is familiar now, part of the morning routine. Thousands of soldiers, thousands of tins, all discarded into the mud. The smell hangs in the air long after the meal is gone, a mixture of canned meat, burnt coffee, and stale cigarettes. You light one yourself, dragging the smoke into your lungs until it chases away the lingering taste of grease. The cigarette burns fast in the wind, the ash crumbling into your hand. You flick it away, and for a moment you feel a little less like you're starving, a little less like you're living in a hole halfway across the world. Every once in a while, someone tries to get creative with their rations. They mix the contents of 2 cans together, add a bit of instant coffee for flavour, or heat the tin over a small fire until the grease loosens. The result is never better, just different. Men joke that it's gourmet cooking, laugh about opening a restaurant when they get home, but the laughter dies quickly. No one wants to think too much about the future while they're eating a breakfast that tastes like despair. The monotony is crushing. Day after day, the same tins, the same flavours, the same greasy texture. You start to dread mealtime, not because you aren't hungry, but because you already know exactly what you're about to swallow. You dream of real food, eggs sizzling in butter, bread warm from the oven, fruit fresh and sweet. The dreams make the reality worse. You stare down into your tin, sigh, and take another bite, because there's no alternative. Some mornings, supply runs don't make it through, and breakfast disappears altogether. You chew gum to trick your stomach, or gnaw on a cracker you saved from the day before. Hunger gnaws harder than any ration can satisfy, and you wonder how long your body can keep this up. Men lose weight fast out here, their faces gaunt, their uniforms hanging loose. No one looks healthy. Everyone looks tired, hungry, and worn down by food that doesn't nourish. The officers eat the same rations, though they sometimes hoard the better tins. You watch them spoon out beans and franks while you choke down scrambled eggs that taste like rubber. Resentment simmers, but you keep quiet. Food is food. Complaints don't fill your stomach. By the time you're done, your belly feels heavy, like you've swallowed lead, but the satisfaction is short. Within an hour, you're hungry again, the gnawing back, the emptiness stronger. Breakfast isn't energy, it's a delay, a way to hold off weakness for a little while longer. You wipe your spoon on your sleeve, shove it back in your pocket, and prepare for the day's march. The taste of grease lingers, the smell of cigarettes clings, and the hunger never really leaves. And as you sling your rifle over your shoulder, you realise that food here isn't about flavour, or comfort, or joy. It's just another thing to survive, one more can to open, one more meal to choke down, one more reminder that home is a world away. You pull your uniform tighter around your chest, not because it's warm, but because it's all you have. The fabric is heavy wool layered with cotton, thick enough to feel stiff, thin enough that the wind slices right through it. It was designed for soldiers on paper, not soldiers in Korean winters. On the tag, it promises durability, protection, and comfort. Out here, it delivers none of those things. It's not a shield. It's a damp rag stitched into the shape of a jacket. You wake up freezing, teeth chattering against the icy air, and you already know you'll spend the afternoon sweating inside the same uniform. That's the curse. Korea is a land of extremes, searing heat in summer, murderous cold in winter, and always too much humidity. There's no middle ground, just one misery trading places with another. Your clothes never catch up. They trap heat when you need relief, and leak warmth when you're desperate for insulation. Every hour is discomfort, every shift in weather another betrayal. The jacket weighs heavy on your shoulders, stiff at the elbows where the seams have crusted with dried sweat and rain. You've worn it so long, the cloth smells like mildew mixed with smoke. A permanent stench you don't even notice until you catch a whiff of yourself while adjusting the straps. The fabric rubs your neck raw, leaving a red line where it chafes with every movement. You try to ignore it, but by the end of the day the skin is sore enough to bleed. Underneath, your undershirt is a joke. Once white, now the colour of old dishwater, stiff with salt from weeks of sweat. It clings to your chest like a damp bandage, never dry, never soft. You think about what it would feel like to pull on a clean t-shirt, fresh out of a drawer at home, cotton smooth against your skin. The thought makes you wince. That world doesn't exist here. Here you peel off a shirt only when you can't bear the smell anymore, and then you put it right back on because there's nothing to replace it with. Your trousers sag at the knees, weighed down by mud clumped along the hems. They bunch at your thighs, stiff at the seams, and every step rubs the fabric against your skin until it burns. The pockets bulge with things you can't do without. Cigarettes, matches, a letter folded so many times it's paper thin, and maybe a scrap of candy you've been saving. You pat them reflexively, making sure they're still there, as if losing them would unravel the thin thread holding you together. Then there's the parka. Issued too late for most men, it's thick, bulky, and poorly stitched, but it's better than nothing. The problem is, it turns your body into a furnace once the sun rises, trapping every bead of sweat inside. You march up a hill, snow crunching under your boots, and by the time you reach the top, you're soaked through. Your undershirt clings, your jacket damp, your parka heavy with moisture. You strip it off for relief, and the wind cuts through instantly, chilling your sweat until your skin burns with cold. You can't win. Either you boil or you freeze. Most days you do both before noon. The helmet on your head doesn't help. It's steel, heavy, dented from being dropped too many times. The strap cuts into your chin, rubbing it raw. Sweat pools under the rim in summer, drips into your eyes, stings with every blink. In winter, frost creeps across the metal, and you feel it sucking heat from your scalp. You can't take it off, not even for a moment, because the one time you do might be the time shrapnel finds you. So you wear it, hate it, curse it, and pretend you don't notice the dull ache in your neck after hours of carrying it. Your hands are another battlefield. Gloves, when you have them, are thin wool that soak through instantly. The dampness stiffens them, freezes them until your fingers barely move. You try to light a cigarette and your hands shake, the match slipping from your grip. You try to hold your rifle and your fingers won't close all the way. Sometimes you take the gloves off just to feel something, even if that something is pain. The cold bites instantly, numbing you to the bone, but at least you can move for a few minutes before frostbite threatens. Boots are the cruelest part. Heavy leather, thick soles, laces that dig into your ankles. They're supposed to be tough, but they aren't tough enough for endless marches through mud and snow. The seams split, the soles crack, the insides never dry. You stomp through rivers and puddles that seep in instantly, soaking your socks, turning your feet into sponges. By the time you stop for the night, your toes are numb, your heels blistered, your arches screaming. You peel off the socks and see skin puckered and white, patches rubbed raw where the boot chewed through. You rub them, blow on them, curse them, then shove them back inside because there's nowhere else for them to go. Boots eat your feet slowly, day by day, and there's no escape. Layered on top of all of this is the constant weight of gear. Belts pulling at your waist, straps digging into your shoulders, packs heavy with ammunition, grenades, and whatever else you're expected to haul. The straps pinch your skin, cut into your collarbones, and the jacket underneath only adds to the friction. You shift the load every few minutes, trying to find relief, but there isn't any. The clothes stick, the pack grinds, and your body carries the marks long after you take it off at night. Sweat and frost mix together until you don't know which is worse. You climb a hill, body burning, sweat dripping down your back, only to collapse at the top and feel the wind freeze it instantly. You're soaked and shivering, hot and cold, exhausted and restless. The uniform doesn't protect you from the extremes. It magnifies them. You're always damp, always uncomfortable, always 2 steps away from hypothermia or heat exhaustion, depending on which side of the weather decided to torture you that day. And the smell. It clings to everything. Sweat soaked into the seams, mildew from rain, smoke from endless fires, and the metallic tang of blood that never quite washes out. You catch whiffs of yourself and gag, but you keep wearing the uniform because there's no alternative. Everyone smells the same. It's the scent of war. Wool, sweat, dirt, and despair stitched into every fibre. You remember the feel of clean clothes back home, fresh laundry folded neatly, the smell of soap. Out here, that memory feels like something you dreamed. You can't imagine a shirt without stains, a pair of socks without holes, a jacket that doesn't cling damply to your shoulders. Even if you survive, even if you go home, you wonder if the stench will cling to you forever, buried deep in your skin. So you dress each morning in the same damp misery, layer by layer, knowing you'll sweat through it, freeze in it, bleed into it, and never feel comfortable again. The clothes aren't protection. They're punishment, heavy and suffocating, but they're the only thing between your skin and the biting air. You pull the collar tight, adjust the straps, shove your feet into boots that chew them raw, and remind yourself that this is survival. Not comfort, not style, not dignity. Just survival wrapped in damp wool and cracking leather. And once you're dressed, once the gear is strapped on, once the helmet is snug against your aching skull, you're ready. Not ready in the sense of eager, ready in the sense of resigned, ready to march, to dig, to fight, to sweat and freeze all over again, because that's all the uniform promises. You slide your feet back into the boots, not because you want to, but because you don't have a choice. They're already damp from yesterday, stiff around the ankles where mud has dried into crust, and heavy in a way that feels more like shackles than shoes. They're supposed to be rugged military footwear, designed for long marches and rough terrain. What they really are is leather prisons that gnaw at your flesh from the moment you lace them up. The first thing you notice every morning is the weight. Each boot feels like a cinder block tied to your leg. You lift one foot, set it down, then the other, already exhausted before you've taken your first step. The leather doesn't bend easily. It creaks with every movement, rubbing your skin raw at the heel, pressing against your toes until they're cramped and throbbing. You've tried adjusting the laces, loosening them, tightening them, stuffing cloth into the gaps. Nothing works. The boots always win. Inside, your socks are damp, no matter how many times you've wrung them out. Sweat, rain, melted snow, it all soaks through, turning the insides into swamps. You feel the squish with every step, the water pressing between your toes, the skin softening and peeling. You've seen what happens if you ignore it too long. Men pull off their socks at night, and the skin comes with them. Toes blackened, heels split open, flesh raw and bleeding. Medics call it trench foot, but the men call it what it really is, rot. You rub your feet when you can, blow on them to warm them, swap socks with someone if you're lucky enough to trade. But the damp always comes back. The boots don't care. Marches are torture. Mile after mile across jagged hills, boots sinking into mud, slipping on rocks, sliding across ice. Each step grinds your toes against the leather, heels blistering, arches aching. You try to ignore it, focus on the man in front of you, keep moving because stopping isn't an option. But the pain grows, a dull throb that spreads up your legs, into your knees, your back. By the end of the day, your whole body aches, and you know most of it started at your feet. The smell is unbearable. Sweat, mildew, and leather combine into a stench so strong you gag when you pull the boots off. The socks inside are stiff with dried salt, yellowed and ragged at the edges. You hold them away from your face as you peel them off, then stare at the damage. Toes swollen, blisters popped and oozing, nails cracked and discoloured. You rub them, press them, whisper curses under your breath, then shove them back inside because you don't have another option. The boots go back on, and the cycle starts again. At night, you hear men moan softly as they peel their boots off, the sound of pain as familiar as gunfire. Some try to dry them near fires, but the heat warps the leather, stiffening it even more. Others stuff them with newspaper, scraps of cloth, anything to soak up the moisture, but the effort barely makes a difference. By morning, they're just as heavy, just as damp, just as unforgiving. You slip your foot inside and feel the cold wrap around your toes like a vice. The first step is agony, the second no better, and by the third, you've resigned yourself to another day of punishment. When the weather turns brutal, the boots betray you completely. In winter, they freeze solid, the leather stiff as wood, the soles like blocks of ice. You kick them against rocks, slap them with your hands, trying to loosen them enough to slide on. Your feet go numb within minutes, toes stiff, skin turning pale, then red, then purple. You stamp them against the ground to bring back circulation, but all you get is pain, sharp and stabbing, like needles driven under your nails. In summer, the opposite happens. The boots trap heat, baking your feet until the sweat pours, the skin softens, and the blisters multiply. You can't win. It's either frostbite or fungus, burns or rot. The boots make sure of it. The terrain doesn't help. Korea is nothing but hills, valleys, and rivers, each one worse than the last. You climb steep slopes, your boots slipping in loose dirt, your toes jammed against the front until they bruise. You slide down the other side, the leather grinding against your heels, the friction burning until you limp. You cross rivers up to your knees, the water rushing into your boots, filling them like buckets. You pour them out afterward, but they never dry, the leather holding moisture like a sponge. You march on anyway, squelching with every step, each stride a reminder that your feet are rotting inside the cages. You think about the boots back home. Polished leather, clean socks, shoes that actually fit. You remember the feeling of dry feet, of comfort, of walking without pain. That memory fades quickly out here. You can't imagine what it feels like anymore. The boots have erased it, replacing comfort with misery, normalcy with torment. Sometimes you fantasize about taking them off and walking barefoot, even across jagged rocks and frozen ground. The thought tempts you when the pain grows too sharp, when the blisters burst and the skin peels. But you know you can't. Bare feet mean cuts, infections and worse. The boots may break you, but without them, you wouldn't last an hour. They're the lesser evil, the devil you know. The constant reminder that survival comes with suffering. You watch other men suffer too. Some hobble, limping with each step. Toes blackened. Heels bandaged poorly. Others have their boots cut away by medics. Feet swollen beyond recognition. Gangrene already setting in. You hear stories of amputations. Men losing toes, feet, even legs. All because of boots that weren't made for this land, this weather, this war. You wonder if your feet will survive, or if one morning you'll peel off a sock and find the damage has gone too far. The officers don't have it better. Their boots are the same, stiff and unforgiving. You see them grimace when they march, their steps just as heavy, their socks just as damp. There's no rank that protects you from the boots. They chew through every foot equally, turning soldiers into cripples long before the enemy does. The sound of boots is constant. The crunch on frozen ground, the squelch in mud, the slap against stones. It fills your ears until you can't hear anything else. It's the rhythm of the war, the endless march forward, one painful step at a time. You don't think about the destination anymore. You just think about the next step, and the one after that, and how many more your feet can take before they give out. At night, when you finally peel them off, you stare at your feet in the dim light and wonder how much longer they'll last. You rub them, blow on them, curse them, but it doesn't matter. Tomorrow you'll shove them back inside, lace them tight, and march again. The boots don't care about your pain. They don't care about your survival. They just keep breaking you, one step at a time, until there's nothing left but blisters, bruises, and bone. And as you lie back in your hole, feet throbbing, boots resting beside you like silent executioners, you know the morning will bring them back. The war doesn't stop. The boots don't stop. And your body doesn't get a say. You'll lace them up again, feel the leather bite, and march until the boots decide what part of you they'll take next. You run your tongue across your teeth and immediately regret it. They feel rough, jagged, as if someone's been filing them down with sandpaper while you slept. A thick film coats them, sour and gritty, and no amount of spitting clears it away. The taste is always the same: stale coffee, canned grease, cigarette smoke, and something sour you don't want to identify. You haven't seen a toothbrush since you shipped out, and the closest thing to toothpaste is chewing gum handed out with rations. You chew it for the sugar rush, spit it into the mud, and pretend it counts as hygiene. But your mouth knows better. Dental care doesn't exist out here. If a tooth aches, you grit your teeth, literally, and hope the pain dulls before it drives you insane. If it doesn't, you're out of luck. Medics can't fix teeth. At best, they'll yank it out with a pair of pliers. No anaesthesia, no warning, just a sharp tug and the sound of your own scream. Infection. That's another roll of the dice. No antibiotics strong enough to stop it. A toothache here isn't just discomfort. It's a threat. One that can spread through your jaw, into your blood, and kill you before the enemy even gets the chance. Most men try to ignore it. They cover the smell of decay with tobacco, puffing on cigarettes until their mouths taste like ash instead of rot. Tobacco is everywhere, more common than soap, more plentiful than clean water. Packs of Lucky Strikes and Chesterfields are stuffed into every ration box, cartons stacked in supply tents. You light up without thinking, the cigarette dangling from your lips, while you lace your boots, clean your rifle, or hunch in your foxhole. Smoke curls into the air, mixing with the fog, the stench of damp wool, and the sour reek of bodies that haven't been washed in weeks. The first drag stings, harsh and bitter, but it covers the taste of your mouth. For a few minutes, you don't notice the sourness of your breath or the dull ache in your gums. You focus on the burn in your throat, the flicker of warmth in your chest, the illusion of calm settling over you. It's not comfort, but it's close enough. You ash into the mud, grind the butt under your heel, and light another one an hour later. Cigarettes become ritual, the only reliable distraction from the taste of neglect. But tobacco brings its own punishment. Your tongue feels thick, your gums tender, your teeth stained yellow and brown. Some men develop sores along the inside of their cheeks, ulcers that burn when they swallow, raw patches that never heal. They call it trench mouth, and it spreads quickly. Gums swollen, bleeding when you chew, the taste of copper in your spit. It hurts to eat, hurts to drink, hurts even to talk. You see men wincing with every bite of canned meat, blood mixing with grease, but they choke it down anyway because hunger doesn't wait for comfort. The smell is unmistakable. Rotting gums, infected teeth, smoke layered on top like cheap perfume. When men talk close, the stench makes you turn your head, but you don't say anything. Everyone smells the same. Everyone's mouth is falling apart, one tooth at a time, one ulcer after another. No one's safe from it. You try to rinse with canteen water, swish and spit into the mud, but it doesn't help. The bacteria live in your gums, thriving in the filth, immune to your efforts. Some men carry toothpicks, little splinters of wood they chew on to scrape away bits of food. They jab them between their teeth, spit out blood, and keep going. Others rub their gums with salt when they can find it, wincing at the sting, but grateful for the momentary relief. You've even seen men gargle with whiskey, if they're lucky enough to get their hands on it, swishing it around like a makeshift antiseptic before swallowing it down for the burn. Desperation makes everything a remedy, even if it doesn't work. You dream of toothbrushes sometimes, the simple act of scrubbing away the filth, of spitting into a sink, of rinsing with clean water. It feels like a luxury on par with a hot bath or a soft bed. You can't imagine the smoothness of clean teeth anymore, the freshness of mint. You've forgotten what it feels like to smile, without wondering how bad your breath smells, or whether the next bite will send a jolt of pain through your jaw. Out here, mouths are just another battlefield, one that never gets reinforcements. The worst part is the silence around it. No one complains about their teeth. Complaints don't change anything. You just chew carefully, favouring the side that hurts less, swallow quickly to avoid chewing at all, and keep smoking until the pain dulls. You see men wince, see them press a hand to their jaw when they think no one's looking, but no one talks about it. There's no point. Out here, pain isn't unusual. It's expected. When trench mouth gets bad enough, men stop eating. Their faces grow hollow, their uniforms hang loose, their eyes sink. The hunger gnaws, but the pain is worse. Medics might hand them soft rations, soups, or puddings if they exist, but most of the time it's the same canned meat, the same crackers, the same punishment in tin. You force yourself to eat, even when every bite feels like glass grinding into your gums. Hunger wins every time, but the victory is hollow. Cigarettes keep coming. You smoke until your fingers are yellow, until your lungs ache, until your teeth feel like they're coated in tar. The addiction is stronger than the rot, stronger than the ulcers, stronger than the fear that your mouth will never recover. You keep lighting up because it's the only constant, the only thing the army never forgets to supply. You joke that tobacco keeps you alive, even as it slowly kills you, because the alternative is facing the taste of your own mouth. At night, lying in your hole, you clench your jaw and feel the dull throb spread through your head. You run your tongue over your gums, taste the copper, swallow hard, and light one last cigarette before you try to sleep. The smoke lingers in the air, mixing with the stench of sweat and damp wool, settling into your clothes, your hair, your skin. You fall asleep with the taste of ash on your tongue, the ache in your teeth fading only when exhaustion finally drags you under. And in the morning, when you wake up, the first thing you notice isn't the cold or the mud. It's your mouth, dry and sour, coated in filth, the pain waiting like an old friend. You spit into the dirt, stretch your jaw, and reach for another cigarette, because that's the only relief you're going to get. The orders come down before your body is ready. You've barely choked down the last bite of cold rations, barely rubbed the sleep grit from your eyes, when the word spreads, move out. There's no debate, no hesitation. Packs are slung onto aching shoulders, rifles clutched tight, and boots that already feel like iron shackles are forced back into motion. You join the line, one more shape in a column of exhausted shapes, and begin the march. It isn't a walk. Walking is something you do back home, through streets, down sidewalks, across flat ground with no weight on your back. This is different. This is marching. And marching means endless miles of terrain that looks the same no matter how far you go. Hills that rise like walls, valleys that drop into mud-choked swamps, narrow trails carved by goats long before armies decided to stomp through them. Every step is a negotiation with the ground. Rocks slip underfoot, mud grabs at your soles, streams soak your legs until you're carrying water along with your pack. The pack itself feels heavier with each mile. It digs into your shoulders, straps biting deep, rubbing skin raw until it splits. Sweat runs down your back in rivulets, soaking your undershirt, turning the fabric into wet sandpaper against your spine. You shift the straps, adjust the weight, but nothing helps. The pack never lightens. It doesn't matter that you've eaten through some of the rations or smoked half the cigarettes. It feels just as heavy as the day before, and heavier the day after. The rifle adds its own burden. Carried against your chest, across your back, or slung in your hands, it never fits comfortably. The steel grows hot under the sun, cold in the wind, slippery in the rain. Your fingers cramp from gripping it, but letting go isn't an option. You stumble on loose rocks, almost trip on a root, but you keep the barrel up, away from the dirt, because a clogged rifle is a dead rifle. You mutter curses at it under your breath, but you hold it tighter, because it's the only thing standing between you and an enemy waiting just beyond the next hill. The march stretches on without end. Hours blur together, punctuated only by the sound of boots crunching, sucking, or slipping, depending on the ground. No one talks much. Words take energy, and energy is precious. You focus on the back of the man in front of you, the rhythm of his steps, the sway of his pack. Sometimes you zone out, the monotony lulling you into a trance where you forget you're even moving. Then a stumble jolts you back, pain shooting up your leg, and you're reminded that every step is a battle. The hills are merciless. You climb one, lungs burning, thighs screaming, sweat dripping into your eyes. At the top, because you expect relief, but instead you see another rise ahead, steeper than the last. You descend carefully, knees shaking, boots sliding on loose dirt, then start the climb again. Up, down, like a punishment on repeat. Some men lean forward, hands on their knees, gasping for breath. Others mutter curses under their breath, words lost in the wind. You keep moving because stopping isn't an option. The line never stops. The weather decides its own torture. On hot days, the sun bakes your neck, sweat pours down your back, and the uniform clings until you feel like you're drowning inside it. Your boots squelch with every step, socks soaked through, blisters growing by the hour. On cold days, the wind cuts through every layer, numbing your fingers, freezing the sweat into icy patches against your skin. Your breath comes out in clouds, lungs burning with every inhale. Rain turns the trail into sludge, sucking at your boots, pulling them off if you're not careful. Snow hides the ground, disguises rocks and holes that twist ankles and send men sprawling. No matter the season, misery finds you. Your feet suffer most. Every step sends a throb of pain through your arches, heels and toes. Blisters burst, soaking your socks with blood. Toenails crack and blacken, pressing painfully against the inside of your boots. You try not to limp, because limping slows you down, draws attention, risks being pulled out and labelled weak. So you grit your teeth, adjust your stride, and keep moving, each step carving pain deeper into your muscles. The sounds of the march never change, boots slapping, gear clinking, men coughing, the occasional bark of an officer. Sometimes artillery rumbles in the distance, a reminder that this isn't just a long hike, but a war zone. The sound blends into the rhythm of your steps until you barely notice it anymore. The march becomes everything, your whole world condensed into the next footfall, the next hill, the next patch of mud. When breaks come, they're short and unsatisfying. You drop your pack, collapse onto the ground, and stretch your legs, but the relief is fleeting. The moment you start to relax, the order comes down to move again. You force yourself upright, shoulders protesting, back aching, feet screaming, and fall back into line. The breaks feel more like teasers than rest, reminders of comfort you'll never get. Food on the march is whatever you can cram into your mouth without stopping. A cracker from your pocket, chewed quickly and washed down with a gulp of lukewarm water. A bite of chocolate that crumbles before you swallow. Cigarettes smoked while walking, the ash falling onto your uniform as you shuffle forward. Meals blur into motion. More fuel than food, more survival than satisfaction. The landscape offers no distraction. Hills roll endlessly, covered in scrubby brush and rocks. Villages appear sometimes, small clusters of huts, their inhabitants staring blankly as you pass. Children stand in doorways, watching the column of soldiers march by, eyes wide, expressions unreadable. You don't stop, don't speak, don't make eye contact. The march doesn't allow for it. You pass through, then back into the hills, and the memory of faces fades into the monotony of dirt and sweat. Fatigue builds until it feels permanent. Your shoulders slump, your head droops, your knees threaten to buckle. You stumble, catch yourself, and keep moving. Some men collapse outright, bodies giving up before their minds do. They're dragged to the side, medics checking pulses, others stepping around without slowing. The line keeps moving, because it has to. Out here, one man's collapse doesn't stop the war. You think about home sometimes, about long walks down familiar streets, about shoes that didn't weigh a ton, about trips that ended somewhere comfortable. Those memories feel distant, almost unreal. Out here, walking is suffering, marching is misery, and the only destination is more hills, more dirt, more exhaustion. You wonder if your legs will ever stop aching, if your shoulders will ever feel light again, if your feet will ever know comfort. You doubt it. The march leaves its marks deep, long after the miles are behind you. Night marches are worse. Darkness hides the trail, turns every step into a gamble. You stumble over rocks, trip on roots, slide into ditches you didn't see. The column moves slower, but the pain doesn't ease. Lanterns flicker, flashlights dart, but mostly you march in shadow, guided by the sound of boots ahead of you. Fatigue deepens, eyes droop, heads nod. You walk half asleep, jerking awake when you stumble, heart racing. The night feels endless, stretching into eternity, until dawn finally paints the sky grey, and you realise you've walked through another world without remembering it. By the time the order comes to stop, to dig in, to collapse into whatever hole you can scrape out of the ground, your body is wrecked. Shoulders raw, back bent, feet swollen, legs trembling. You drop your pack, fall into the mud, and sit in silence, too tired to speak. The march is over, but only for today. Tomorrow it starts again. Another column, another trail, another endless misery of footsteps. And as you peel off your boots, rub your aching feet, and light another cigarette, you realise the march isn't just part of the war. It is the war. Not the battles, not the gunfire, not the headlines. Just the endless grind of moving forward, mile after mile, hill after hill, until you don't remember anything else. The pack on your back is more than just equipment. It's a punishment disguised as necessity. A constant reminder that your body is only one step away from collapse. You heave it up each morning with a grunt, straps cutting into shoulders already rubbed raw, and you feel the familiar drag as it settles into place. The first steps aren't so bad. You think maybe today will be easier, maybe your body's gotten used to it. But within an hour, the weight doubles. Within 2, it triples. By midday, it feels like you're carrying another man on your back, one who doesn't know how to walk, and insists on dragging you down with every step. Inside are the things the army swears you need. Ammunition boxes clattering with rounds, grenades tucked into pouches, a bedroll rolled too tight to be comfortable, and a blanket stiff with weeks of use. A change of socks if you're lucky, though they will be soaked through by noon. A small mess kit that rattles with every step, clanking against your canteen. Cigarettes, of course, always cigarettes, stuffed into pockets and wedged between supplies like filler in a package. Everything has weight. Nothing feels optional. The heaviest part isn't the pack itself. It's what's strapped to you. The rifle slung across your chest or your shoulder, never light, always awkward. The steel helmet pressing down on your neck. The chin strap rubbing your skin raw. The belt around your waist, heavy with cartridges, canteens, a bayonet banging against your thigh with each stride. Together, it all adds up until your body feels less like a human being and more like a mule. You adjust constantly trying to find some relief. Shift the straps higher on your shoulders, cinch the belt tighter around your waist, loosen the rifle sling so it rests differently against your chest. Nothing helps. The weight just moves pain from one spot to another, carving grooves into your skin until every inch of you aches. At the end of the day, red welts stripe your shoulders, your hips feel bruised, and your hands are swollen from gripping straps too tightly. You drop the pack and swear you'll never put it on again. Then morning comes, and you lift it once more, because you don't have a choice. The hills make it worse. Climbing with the load feels like dragging an anchor uphill. Every step burns in your thighs, your chest heaves, and the sweat soaks your undershirt until it sticks to your back. Going downhill is no better. The weight shoves you forwards, forcing your knees to absorb every ounce of it. You stumble, catch yourself, stumble again, praying you don't twist an ankle under all that gear. The terrain doesn't care how much you're carrying. It just keeps rising and falling, punishing you either way. Rest breaks don't really ease the burden. You drop the pack, collapse into the dirt, and stretch your shoulders, but the relief is temporary. The straps have carved themselves so deep into your muscles that you still feel the weight even when it's not there. You rub the soreness, roll your shoulders, and then groan when the call comes to move out again. Hoisting the pack feels harder every time, as if the straps are cutting into wounds instead of skin. You curse it, threaten to throw it down and leave it behind, but you never do. Because the things inside might save your life. Or at least, that's what you tell yourself. The irony is that most of what you carry isn't for you. The ammunition feeds a weapon that will be empty again tomorrow. The grenades might never be used, but you haul them anyway. The food, barely edible, adds pounds without ever making you feel full. Even the canteen feels heavier than the water inside is worth, sloshing with every step. You start to hate every object. Each one feels like an insult, a burden designed to break you slowly. Sometimes the army piles more on top. A box of mortar shells that needs hauling to the next position. A radio heavier than anything else, its sharp corners digging into your back. A roll of barbed wire, awkward and sharp, scraping your uniform with every step. You're told it's temporary, just until you reach the next ridge. But temporary always stretches longer than promised, and by the time you finally set it down, you feel like your spine has been compressed an inch shorter. The men joke about it. They say the army believes if a soldier isn't miserable, he isn't prepared. They laugh about how much junk they'll throw away the second no one's watching. And some do. They ditch extra gear in the mud, leave tins behind, drop ammunition when they think they won't need it. But most can't risk it. The one thing you throw away will be the one thing you desperately need tomorrow. So you keep carrying it, hating it more with every mile. At night, when you finally peel the straps off your shoulders, you find the damage they've done. Deep grooves in your flesh, purple bruises spreading across your hips, skin rubbed raw where the belt dug in. You massage it with sore fingers, roll onto your side in your foxhole, and try to sleep despite the throbbing pain. In the morning, you pick it all up again, strap it on, and start the cycle anew. The weight doesn't just live on your back, it lives in your bones. The worst part is the way it never leaves your mind. Even when you set the pack down, even when you lie in the mud with nothing on your shoulders, you still feel it pressing against you. You dream about it, nightmares where you're crushed under the load, legs pinned, unable to move. You wake with a start, sit up, and realise the reality isn't much different. The burden is waiting, sitting silently beside you, ready to climb back onto your spine as soon as the whistle blows. You think about home, about carrying nothing more than a school bag, a lunchbox, a grocery sack. You remember complaining about them once, the weight pulling at your arms, your shoulders sore from straps. The memory makes you laugh bitterly. Those bags were feathers compared to this. Out here, you're a pack animal, loaded until you nearly buckle, then told to move faster. The march never lets up, the hills never end, and the pack never lightens. You keep going because there's no choice, because the alternative is falling behind and being left. You carry more than you can handle, and then you carry more than that, because the war demands it. You dig your shoulders in, tighten the straps, and take another step. The weight doesn't get easier. You just get used to breaking under it. The weather in Korea isn't just background noise. It's a weapon. One that doesn't care what uniform you wear or whose flag you salute. It's everywhere, inescapable and relentless. When you wake in the morning, before you even think about food, before you even stretch your legs, you're already aware of it. The temperature presses on you like another layer of gear, one that you can't take off, one that doesn't loosen with time. When the heat comes, it comes without mercy. The sun beats down on your helmet, turning the steel into a skillet that radiates into your skull. Sweat starts instantly, beading along your forehead, sliding down your temples, dripping into your eyes. You blink against the sting, swipe at it with a filthy sleeve, and only make the grime worse. The sweat doesn't stop. It soaks your undershirt, clings to your back, runs down your legs until your socks squish inside your boots. Every step is a slog, your body dragging itself through a haze of exhaustion. The air is thick, heavy with humidity, and each breath feels like you're sucking steam instead of oxygen. The heat makes everything harder. The pack digs deeper. The rifle grows heavier. The boots rub rawer, even thinking it feels like effort. You move in a fog, brain dulled by dehydration, eyes squinting against the glare. Water helps, but it never lasts. Canteens run dry by midday, and refills aren't guaranteed. You sip carefully, rationing each mouthful, though the thirst never leaves. Your tongue swells, your lips crack, your throat aches. You think about ice cubes, cold soda, the taste of something fresh, but the fantasy only makes the thirst sharper. At night, the heat doesn't always leave. Sometimes it lingers, so turning foxholes into ovens. You lie in the dirt, shirt stuck to your chest, sweat pooling under your arms, unable to sleep because the air won't cool. Mosquitoes whine around your ears, biting any exposed skin, leaving welts that itch until you bleed from scratching. You slap at them in the dark, curse them under your breath, and wonder how many diseases ride on their wings. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow, broken, restless. You wake more tired than before. Then, without warning, the cold arrives. It doesn't creep in slowly. It slams down, sudden and brutal, as if the land itself has flipped a switch. The air turns sharp, slicing at your skin. Breath clouds instantly. Every exhale a puff of white that vanishes in the wind. The ground freezes underfoot, turning mud into jagged stone. The sweat on your back chills into icy patches that sting like burns. You pull your jacket tighter, adjust the parka, but the wind cuts through every gap, finds every weakness. The cold gnaws at your fingers first. Gloves do little, soaking through, stiffening into frozen shells. Your fingertips ache, then go numb, then ache again when you try to warm them. You struggle to button your jacket, to grip your rifle, to strike a match for a cigarette. Your body doesn't cooperate, trembling too hard, clumsy from the chill. Toes follow soon after, trapped in damp socks inside boots that feel like iceboxes. Each step is agony, a stabbing pain that dulls into numbness, only to flare again when circulation tries to return. You stamp your feet, rub your hands, curse the sky, but nothing helps. The cold always wins. Sleep in the cold is a cruel joke. You huddle in your hole, blanket wrapped tight, body curled into itself, but warmth never comes. The ground steals heat through your clothes, through your bones. You shiver uncontrollably, teeth clattering, muscles spasming until you ache all over. Every gust of wind feels like a blade across your face. Closing your eyes doesn't bring rest, only a kind of drifting half-consciousness where you wonder if you're awake at all. Between the extremes lies the worst kind of weather, the in-between, the days when it can't decide whether to scald you or freeze you. Mornings start with frost on your gear, hands stiff, breath hanging in the air. By noon, the sun has burned it away, and you're drenched in sweat, stripping layers you'll need again by nightfall. Your body never adjusts. It shivers, then sweats, then shivers again. Clothes stay damp, never drying, clinging like a second skin. The cycle breaks you slowly, weakening you until you don't know if your exhaustion comes from marching or from the war the weather wages on your body. Rain makes everything worse. It doesn't fall gently. It pours, slamming against your helmet, soaking your jacket, filling your boots. Mud rises instantly, sucking at your feet with each step. Rivers swell, turning crossings into ordeals where you stagger through chest-deep water, gear dragging you down, boots filling until they're twice as heavy. At night, the rain seeps into your foxhole, turning it into a puddle. You sit in water up to your waist, blanket useless, uniform plastered against your skin. Sleep is impossible. You stare at the black sky, rain dripping off your nose, and wonder if the war will drown you before it shoots you. Snow offers no mercy either. It looks quiet, even beautiful from a distance, but up close it's misery in white. It blinds you, reflecting the sun until your eyes ache. It soaks you, melting through seams, soaking socks, chilling skin. It hides the ground, concealing rocks and holes that twist ankles and send men sprawling. Marching through it drains strength faster than any hill, each step sinking, dragging, pulling you down until your legs scream. You collapse at night with snow still clinging to your jacket, frozen clumps in your hair, and wonder if spring will ever come. Wind ties it all together. Hot wind that feels like a furnace blast. Cold wind that slices like knives. Damp wind that chills you to the bone. It never stops. It roars across the hills, rattles through the trees, pushes smoke from fires into your face until your eyes water. It steals heat when you need warmth, smothers you when you need relief. It turns your helmet into a drum, constant noise beating against your skull. You learn to hate it more than the silence, more than the gunfire. The wind never lets you forget that the land itself is against you. Your body pays the price. Heat exhaustion leaves you dizzy, stumbling, vision swimming. Frostbite numbs toes and fingers until they're useless. Hypothermia creeps in quietly, starting with shivers, ending with stillness. You see men collapse from it all, dragged to the side of the march, medics trying to revive them with blankets or water. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The weather claims lives as surely as bullets. You think about home, about mild summers and winters you used to complain about. You remember standing in front of a fan, stretching hands over a heater, sipping a cold drink in the shade. Those luxuries feel like fantasies here. Out here there's no escape, no relief, only the endless cycle of too hot, too cold, too wet, too dry. You don't control the weather. The weather controls you. Each morning you dress not for comfort, but for survival. You pull on layers you know won't protect you enough. Lace boots that will only soak through. Adjust gear that will freeze or sweat with you. You step outside your hole, feel the air hit your face, and brace yourself for whatever misery the sky has chosen today. Heat, cold, and everything in between. It all waits for you, ready to grind you down 1 degree at a time. Water becomes your obsession the moment you set foot in Korea. Not because it's rare in the land itself. There are rivers, streams, puddles after every rain, but because almost none of it is safe. You stare at the trickle of clear liquid winding between rocks, your throat screaming for it, your tongue swollen, but you know what happens if you give in. 1 sip and you're gambling with parasites, bacteria, diseases that don't care how thirsty you are. Out here, thirst is constant, but trust in water is non-existent. The army tries to make it simple. Canteens are issued, full at the start of every day, heavy enough to drag on your belt. Inside is water that's supposed to be purified, treated with tablets that turn it sour, metallic, sometimes cloudy. You unscrew the cap, lift it to your lips, and hesitate every time. The taste never gets easier. It's like drinking from a rusted pipe, with a hint of swimming pool on top. Some men gag the first time they swallow it, but everyone drinks eventually. The alternative is worse. Your mouth is always dry. No matter how much you ration, no matter how carefully you sip, your throat feels raw, your lips crack, your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth. You want to guzzle the whole canteen in one go, but you can't. You force yourself to take small mouthfuls, rolling the water around your mouth before swallowing, trying to trick your body into feeling satisfied. It never works. You screw the cap back on, hang the canteen at your hip, and tell yourself to hold out a little longer. Refills come when they come. Sometimes a water truck arrives, barrels sloshing with liquid that may or may not have been purified. Men line up with their canteens, watching nervously as it's poured, knowing they'll drink it anyway. Other times, you're left with whatever you can find. A stream running down from the hills, a pond stagnant and green, rainwater pooled in your helmet. You drop the iodine tablets in, wait as long as you can stand, then drink, hoping the bitterness means it's safe. But you've seen too many men doubled over afterward, stomachs cramping, diarrhea pouring out of them until they collapse from dehydration. It's the dysentery lottery, and every sip is a ticket. Coffee is the one constant. Every ration tin has packets of instant crystals, little brown granules sealed in paper. You tear one open, dump it into lukewarm water, and stir with the butt of a spoon until it dissolves. The taste is sharp, bitter, almost burned, but it cuts through the sour of purification tablets. It jolts you awake, keeps your eyes open on long marches, warms your belly when the cold sinks too deep. You cling to it more than food, more than cigarettes. A swallow of bad coffee feels like civilization, even if it tastes like scorched mud. Sometimes you don't bother dissolving it. You pour the crystals straight into your mouth, let them crunch between your teeth, chase them with a sip of water. It tastes worse that way, chalky and acrid, but you get the kick faster. Men share packets, hoard extras, trade cigarettes for coffee like it's gold. When you run out, the withdrawal drags you down, eyelids heavy, head pounding, body sluggish. You beg for more, because nothing else makes the exhaustion bearable. But coffee has its price. It dehydrates you, makes the thirst worse, sends you to piss more often than you can afford in freezing weather. Your stomach churns from the constant bitterness. Your teeth stain darker with every packet. Sometimes the caffeine shakes your hands, makes your heart race when you're trying to steady your rifle. But you keep drinking, because without it, you'd collapse long before the march ends. The real enemy isn't thirst or coffee, it's what comes after. Dysentery strikes without warning, sudden cramps that double you over, a rush to the nearest ditch, everything inside you pouring out until you're left weak and shivering. The pain is constant, like knives twisting in your gut. The smell is unbearable, sour and sickly, impossible to ignore even in the open air. You lose water faster than you can drink it, your body shrinking, eyes sunken, lips pale. Some men recover slowly, dragging themselves back into line with hollow stares. Others don't make it. Dehydration kills as efficiently as a bullet, and there's no glory in dying on a latrine. You watch the men around you, and know it's only a matter of time. Everyone gets sick eventually. You see them clutch their stomachs, sweat pouring down their faces, staggering out of line to collapse behind bushes. You step around them, praying it won't be you today, knowing it will be tomorrow or the next day. The medics hand out pills when they can, chalky tablets that taste like plaster, but supplies run short, and the disease always outpaces the cure. The fear of water runs deep. You sip cautiously, staring at the clear liquid in your cup, wondering if this will be the one that ruins you. Even purified, even boiled, it carries doubt. The taste of iodine is supposed to mean safety, but safety doesn't exist out here. Every swallow is trust in something you can't see, something you know is waiting to gut you from the inside. You drink anyway because thirst is stronger than fear. Sometimes you fantasize about clean water, the way others dream of women. A cold glass from a kitchen faucet, beads of condensation dripping down the outside, ice cubes clinking, the first swallow crisp and fresh. You imagine it so clearly you can almost taste it. But the fantasy fades with every bitter sip of canteen water, every mouthful of coffee grit, every stomach cramp that sends you stumbling into the bushes. Clean water doesn't exist here, only the dysentery lottery. The cycle never ends. Thirst drives you to drink. Drinking makes you sick. Sickness dehydrates you until you're thirstier than before. You laugh bitterly at the irony, but the laugh turns into a cough, your throat too dry to handle it. You raise the canteen again, swallow the bitter liquid, and hope you've drawn a winning ticket this time. And when you lie back in your hole at night, stomach gurgling, mouth sour, lips cracked, you know tomorrow will bring the same struggle. You'll wake thirsty, drink bitter, gamble with your insides, and march until the water runs out again. Out here, survival isn't about bullets or bombs. It's about every sip of water, every swallow of coffee, every roll of the dice your stomach throws when you drink what the land offers. You don't think much about hospitals until you see one up close in Korea. Back home, a hospital means white walls, clean sheets, soft voices, and the smell of antiseptic. Out here, it means canvas stretched tight against poles, mud seeping under the flaps, and the constant groan of men whose bodies have been broken by more than exhaustion. You don't want to end up here, but eventually everyone does, whether it's for a wound, a fever, or a stomach that finally gives out. The field hospital isn't a place of comfort, it's a holding pen for pain. The first thing you notice is the smell. Not clean, not sterile, but a mixture of sweat, blood, alcohol, and rot. The air is heavy with it, thick enough to stick to your nostrils, to linger in your throat until you taste it when you swallow. You breathe through your mouth, but it doesn't help. The smell settles on you, clings to your uniform, follows you out even when you leave. It's the smell of bodies fighting battles they can't win, and of doctors trying to cheat time with too few tools. Inside, cots are lined up as close as they can fit, bodies on every one. Men shift, groan, mutter in half-conscious voices. Some lie still, staring at the ceiling, eyes glassy. Bandages wrap around heads, arms, legs, stained brown and red where blood has soaked through. Tourniquets bite into limbs, keeping men alive by inches while the colour drains from their faces. The air buzzes with flies, drawn to wounds despite the nurses' swats. The staff move quickly, but not delicately. Medics and doctors bark orders, shuffle between patients, prioritise by who might live and who won't. If you're bleeding badly but still breathing, they rush you onto a cot and get to work. If you're too far gone, they leave you in the corner, a blanket pulled over your chest, waiting for the inevitable. It's cold, but it's efficient. Out here, efficiency matters more than compassion. The medicine itself feels less like help, and more like another form of punishment. Morphine exists, but it's rationed, handed out in small doses to men screaming loudest. You see the relief wash over them for a while, their cries softening, their bodies loosening. But the supply runs out quickly. For everyone else, there's little more than whiskey, cigarettes, and gauze. You grit your teeth as the doctor digs into a wound with forceps, pulling out shrapnel without anaesthesia. You clench fists until your nails cut your palms, swallow curses until your throat is raw. Pain is unavoidable. You just hope it doesn't last long. Even simple procedures turn into ordeals. A tooth pulled with pliers, no numbing, just a hand on your jaw and a sharp twist. An abscess drained with a scalpel, the pressure finally relieved, but the cut itself leaving you shaking with shock. Stitches driven through torn skin, the needle thick, the thread coarse, the doctor working fast because there are 5 more men waiting. The needle burns with every push, the thread tugs like fishing line, but you don't complain. Complaining just makes them move slower. Infections are constant, and the cures are almost as bad. Sulphur powder is dumped into wounds, a chalky grit that burns like fire when it touches raw flesh. Penicillin shots are jabbed into thighs with needles that look big enough to sew canvas. The sting lingers for hours, spreading through muscle until your leg feels like it's been bruised from the inside. You limp out afterward, grateful for the treatment, but cursing the pain it leaves behind. Sometimes the doctors have no choice but to cut deeper. You see men hauled in with limbs mangled beyond repair, bones shattered, flesh torn apart. The saw comes out, gleaming under the harsh light, and the room falls silent except for the man on the cot. He thrashes, screams, tries to fight, but there's no escape. They strap him down, give him a cloth to bite, and start sawing. The sound is unforgettable, rough, grating, like cutting through wood, except it's bone. The screaming stops eventually, replaced by ragged breathing, then silence. If the man survives, He wakes without a leg, without an arm, staring at the bandaged stump in disbelief. If he doesn't, the blanket goes over his face. Either way, the saw keeps working. Illness fills the cots just as often as wounds. Dysentery, pneumonia, fevers that leave men shivering 1 hour and burning the next. The doctors have little to fight them with. A few pills, a little quinine, some crude treatments that barely touch the sickness. Most of the time, they tell you to rest, drink water, and pray. The hospital becomes a row of bodies curled on cots, moaning into the night, blankets damp with sweat. The sickness spreads easily, coughing from one cot to the next, until half the tent is groaning in chorus. The staff themselves look worn, their uniforms stained, their eyes hollow. They smoke constantly, hands trembling as they work, the smell of nicotine clinging to the alcohol and blood. They see too much, do too much, and know they can't save everyone. Their voices grow hoarse from shouting orders, their tempers short from exhaustion. But they keep working, because stopping isn't an option. Out here, medicine isn't about healing. It's about keeping as many men alive as long as possible. You dread ending up in the hospital, but you know it's inevitable. A cut that doesn't heal, a cough that doesn't stop, a wound that festers overnight. One day you'll stagger under the canvas, collapse onto a cot, and join the chorus of groans. You'll taste the bitterness of pills that do little, feel the sting of needles that bruise more than they heal, hear the saw working on the cot beside yours. And when you leave, if you leave, you'll carry the pain with you, stitched into your skin, aching in your bones. Back home, the word hospital means recovery. Out here it means survival in its most temporary form. You don't come out healed. You come out patched, limping, scarred, carrying the weight of the medicine that hurt as much as the wound. And you know, with a sinking certainty, that you will be back under the canvas soon enough. Food is never about pleasure here. It's not about taste or comfort, or even nutrition the way you'd understand it back home. Out here, food is survival in its cheapest form, stuffed into tins and packets that someone in an office swore would sustain you, but never satisfy you. When the word rations comes up, men groan automatically, not because they're picky, but because they know what's coming. Meals that fight your stomach more than they fill it. Meals that feel like a punishment disguised as nourishment. The tins themselves are squat, heavy, stamped metal that already feels like regret in your hands. You pry them open with your knife, sometimes struggling as the lid sticks or the seal breaks unevenly. Inside is food that barely resembles food. Meat that looks grey, coated in a layer of greasy film. Beans congealed into a solid block that holds the shape of the can. Bread compressed into hard rectangles, dense enough to break teeth. Every item reeks faintly of tin, as if the metal seeped into it, mingling with whatever flavour it once had. You stare at it, nose wrinkling, stomach already unsettled. But hunger doesn't leave you choices. You dig in, chewing slowly, trying not to think about what it tastes like. The meat is stringy, salty to the point of burning, with an aftertaste that lingers like rust. The beans are pasty, sticking to your tongue, sliding down your throat like clay. The bread is dry, crumbling into dust the moment you bite, choking you until you force it down with water. Every bite is a battle, your gag reflex always one step away from winning. Cigarettes soften the blow. Every ration pack comes with a few, tucked neatly beside the food. Men light up before, during and after eating, the smoke masking the taste, calming the stomach. Some say cigarettes are the only thing that make the rations edible at all. Others trade their food for extra smokes, skipping meals entirely just to keep the bitterness of the rations at bay. Hunger gnaws at them, but the thought of choking down another tin is worse. The coffee powder helps too, though it's just another form of bitterness. You stir it into tepid water, sip the acrid liquid, and let it wash down whatever you manage to choke down. The taste of scorched granules is no better than the food, but at least it resets your mouth, dulls the memory of the last bite. You cling to the caffeine, because if nothing else, it keeps your body moving when the food itself does little. Sometimes you get lucky, and the rations include a piece of candy, a bar of chocolate, a packet of gum. The sweetness shocks your tongue, almost painful after weeks of salt and metal. You savour it slowly, letting it dissolve, stretching the moment as far as you can. The candy doesn't last long, but for a few minutes, you remember what food was supposed to taste like. Then it's gone, and you're back to tins of regret. Cooking is almost impossible. Fires draw attention, smoke rising where it shouldn't. Most of the time, you eat straight from the can, cold, the fat congealed, the beans stiff. When you do manage to heat it, the difference isn't much. The meat softens slightly, the beans loosen, but the taste never improves. Warm regret is still regret. Your stomach pays the price. The rations are heavy with preservatives, salt, grease that sits in your gut like lead. You bloat, cramp, sometimes run to the bushes minutes after finishing. Constipation hits just as often, leaving you straining painfully for days, gut knotted, body refusing to cooperate. Dysentery comes anyway, and when it does, the food rushes out of you faster than it went in. You sit in the mud, clutching your belly, wondering if the rations were designed to punish you more than feed you. Men complain constantly. They joke about the tins, give them nicknames, invent stories about what's inside. Meat becomes mule or mule meat. Beans are horse paste. Biscuits are brick rations. No one laughs for long, but the jokes are the only way to make the meals tolerable. Complaining doesn't change the food, but it makes you feel less alone when you're choking it down. Trading happens whenever possible. You swap beans for biscuits, biscuits for cigarettes, cigarettes for candy. Some men hoard the items they can stomach. Others give up entirely and live on smokes and coffee. You scavenge what you can from abandoned supply dumps, picking through discarded tins, hoping to find something different, something less awful. But it's always the same grey meat, the same brick bread, the same regret sealed in metal. The smell of the rations lingers. Once you've opened a can, the stench of grease and tin sticks to your hands, your uniform, the air around you. You wipe your fingers on the dirt, on your pants, on anything you can, but it doesn't go away. You carry the stink into your foxhole, into your sleep, into the next morning. It follows you like another burden, reminding you that even food can turn against you. Back home, meals meant choice. Even the simplest plate had flavour, variety, something to look forward to. Here meals mean endurance. You eat because you have to, not because you want to. Every bite is a chore, every tin a disappointment. You long for fresh bread, fruit, meat that tastes like meat, but the longing only makes it worse. The rations are all you'll get day after day, until the thought of food itself becomes exhausting. And so you eat what you can, throw away what you can't, smoke a cigarette, drink bitter coffee, and move on. The hunger never really fades. The regret never really leaves. Out here, eating isn't living. It's just another part of the grind. Another reminder that the war takes everything, even the simple comfort of a meal. Time stretches differently here. The hours of marching, digging, eating bad food, shivering or sweating, they all blur together until days feel endless. What doesn't blur are the rare moments when mail arrives. A truck pulls up, bags slung out the back, and suddenly every man who was slumped against the dirt perks up like a dog catching a scent. You sit straighter, eyes fixed, waiting to hear your name. If it's called, it feels like winning a lottery. If it's not, you try not to show how much it matters. The letters themselves are thin, worn from the trip across the ocean, but they feel heavy in your hands. The envelopes are smudged with fingerprints, creased from being stuffed into bags, maybe touched by a dozen strangers before they reached you. But once you slide a finger under the flap and open it, all that vanishes. For a few minutes, you're somewhere else. A kitchen with warm light, a porch with creaking wood, a street you know by heart. The words carry you home, even if only in your head. But the words are never quite enough. They talk about weather, about neighbours, about things so small they feel meaningless compared to where you are. The dog dug under the fence again. The neighbour's kid broke a window. Your sister got a new job. None of it matters in the mud and the cold. And yet, it matters more than anything, because it's proof that somewhere life goes on, and you're still connected to it, even if the cord feels frayed. Photographs sometimes come tucked inside, faded, black and white, edges bent from the trip. A smiling wife, a baby who looks older now than when you left. Friends standing in front of places you miss. You stare at the photos until your vision blurs, trace the faces with your thumb, memorize them so you can see them when you close your eyes in the dark. Then you tuck them into your pocket, close to your chest, as if the paper itself can keep you warm. When you don't get letters, the emptiness cuts deeper than hunger. You pretend it doesn't matter, pretend you don't care, but the silence gnaws at you. You wonder if they forgot, if they don't know what to say, if they've moved on. You lie awake at night, staring into the dark, imagining the life you left behind moving without you. Maybe your place at the table is already filled. Maybe your face is already fading from memory. You turn onto your side, press your face into the blanket, and tell yourself you're wrong. But doubt lingers longer than comfort. Writing letters is its own ordeal. You sit with a scrap of paper, pencil in hand, staring at the blank sheet until your head aches. What can you say? That you're tired, cold, sick of eating beans from a can? That you watched someone die yesterday and the image won't leave your head? You don't write those things. You write lies instead. You say you're fine, you're healthy, the weather isn't too bad. You add a joke about the food, maybe a story about a buddy. You make it sound almost like an adventure, because you can't bring yourself to spill the truth. The truth would only spread the misery, and you know they don't deserve that. The paper is thin, the pencil dull, your handwriting cramped from the cold. The words come slowly, awkwardly, and when you're done, the letter feels empty. You fold it anyway, slide it into an envelope, scrawl the address. You drop it in the outgoing pile, knowing it will take weeks to cross the ocean, if it makes it at all. By the time it's read, everything you wrote will already be outdated. A snapshot of misery long since past. but you write anyway, because not writing feels worse. Between letters, time crawls. You find yourself with hours where nothing happens, no orders, no marching, no fighting. The boredom is its own kind of torture. You sit in the dirt, helmet tilted over your eyes, staring at nothing. You pick at the seams of your uniform, count the cartridges on your belt, trace shapes in the mud with a stick. You smoke cigarette after cigarette, letting the minutes dissolve in smoke. Sometimes you talk with the men around you, swapping the same stories again and again, voices low, words half-hearted. Sometimes no one speaks at all, each man trapped in his own head. Cards pass the time, decks bent and worn, edges blackened with grime. Games go on endlessly. Cigarettes or candy for stakes. The shuffle of cards, the muttered curses, the slap of a winning hand. All of it fills the silence for a while. Then the game ends and boredom creeps back in. You lie on your back, staring at clouds if there are clouds, or at the blank expanse of sky if there aren't. You count seconds, minutes, anything to mark the time, but the time never moves fast enough. The loneliness is worst at night. The chatter dies down, the cigarettes burn out, and each man curls into himself in the cold. You listen to the shifting bodies, the muffled coughs, the groans of men trying to sleep. You think about home, about the people you miss, about the quiet moments you took for granted. You ache for a voice that isn't here, a touch that doesn't exist in this place. The distance stretches endlessly, the dark pressing in until it feels like the whole world is just mud, silence, and you. Dreams don't bring relief. When they come, they're full of images you don't want to see. Faces of the dead, places destroyed, flashes of gunfire and noise. You wake with your heart racing, hands clenched, breath ragged. The men around you don't stir. They're trapped in their own dreams, fighting their own battles in silence. You roll onto your side, stare at the dirt wall of the foxhole, wish you could close your eyes without fear. Letters, loneliness, and boredom weave together into a cycle. A letter lifts you up, loneliness drags you back down, boredom grinds you flat. Then another letter arrives, another photo, another scrap of paper that smells faintly of home, and for a few minutes you remember why you keep moving. Then the words fade, the photo crumples in your pocket, and you're back in the same mud, waiting for something to break the monotony. And so you keep writing, keep waiting, keep clinging to scraps of connection that may never be enough. Because without them, the silence would be unbearable, and the war would swallow you whole long before a bullet ever found you. Women in this war are few, and when they appear, they stand out like lanterns in the dark. Not because they bring light or relief, but because they don't belong in the landscape you've grown used to. The hills are full of men, voices low, bodies weighed down with gear, faces dulled by dirt and exhaustion. When you see a woman, it's a reminder that the world outside still exists, but it also makes you uncomfortable, because here she's not outside the war. She's trapped in it just like you. The first women most soldiers meet are the nurses. They arrive in pressed uniforms that don't stay pressed long, sleeves rolled up, hair tucked under caps. They work in tents that smell of blood and antiseptic. Hands never still, voices clipped and steady. You expect them to be soft, gentle, the way nurses are imagined in stories. Instead, they're hard, sharp, efficient. They have to be. The line of cots never ends, and there's no time for comfort when the man in front of you is bleeding out. They jab morphine, wrap bandages, clean wounds, all with speed that leaves you reeling. If you're on a cot, you're just another body to them, one of dozens they'll touch that day. They talk in short orders. Hold still, bite down, don't move. They don't look into your eyes for long, don't linger on your face. They've learned not to, because too many faces blur together. Too many men die after they've done all they could. They keep moving, because stopping means remembering, and remembering would break them. Still, their presence cuts through the monotony. For a brief second, you remember women as they were before all this. Mothers, sisters, wives, girlfriends. You remember soft voices, laughter, perfume. Then the memory fades, replaced by the reality of a nurse's rough hands pressing gauze into your wound. Her voice curt, her eyes ringed with fatigue. She isn't here to comfort you. She's here to keep you alive long enough to be someone else's problem. Outside the hospitals, the only women you see are locals. Villagers forced to live in the path of armies, their lives uprooted by battles they never ask for. They move through ruined streets, carrying buckets of water, baskets of food, children clinging to their skirts. Their faces are blank, their eyes downcast. They don't meet your gaze, and you don't blame them. To them, you're not a saviour. You're just another soldier, another stranger with a rifle, another reminder that their world has been shattered. Some women try to keep life moving. They sell food, sew clothes, wash uniforms in icy rivers. They barter with soldiers for cigarettes, candy, tins of meat. Their hands are cracked, their faces lined with exhaustion, their bodies thin from hunger. You wonder what they were like before the war. If they laughed, if they sang, if they dreamed of anything beyond survival. The war erased those things, left only the grind of endurance. Others are caught in worse ways. Rumours spread of women forced into labour, forced into service, forced into choices no one should ever face. You hear whispers, see shadows, but no one talks openly. The shame hangs heavy, unspoken, lingering in the silence. The war chews up everyone, but women caught in the middle are chewed twice. Once by the fighting, once by those who claim to protect them. Children cling to their mothers, wide-eyed, silent, too young to understand, but old enough to feel fear. You see them flinch at the sound of gunfire, clutching tighter, hiding their faces in skirts. You want to reach out, to offer something, but you have nothing to give. A chocolate bar, a cigarette, maybe a smile. It feels empty against the weight of their loss. You move on, rifle in hand, and they fade into the background. Just another piece of the war's endless scenery. The loneliness makes every encounter sharper. Men stare at the nurses longer than they should, their thoughts written plainly across their faces. They joke, make crude comments, laugh too loudly. It's a mask for the ache underneath, the desperate need for connection. And the nurses ignore it, keep working, let the words slide off them like water. But the longing lingers, heavy in the air, unspoken in the spaces between. For locals, the gaze is different. It's cautious, uncertain, sometimes cruel. Some soldiers see them as a distraction, others as an annoyance, others as a temptation. The power imbalance hangs over every interaction. You hold the rifle, you carry the food, you have the cigarettes. They have nothing. It changes the way men act, strips away the civility they might have had back home. The war erodes not just bodies, but morals. And women in the crossfire bear the weight of that erosion more than anyone. At night, when the camp grows quiet, conversations turn to women. Not the ones here, but the ones left behind. Men whisper about wives, about girlfriends, about women they barely knew but wish they had. They trade stories, sometimes true, sometimes imagined. Voices low, eyes distant. It's a way to remind themselves that life once held something warmer than cold dirt and burnt rations. But the whispers fade, replaced by silence, and the longing never really goes away. Women in Korea aren't part of your war. They don't march, they don't fight, they don't dig foxholes. But they carry the war on their backs all the same. They patch wounds, raise children alone, scrape together food from nothing, endure losses too heavy to name. You see them in flashes. A nurse pressing gauze against a wound, a mother herding children through rubble, a young girl balancing a bucket on her head, and then they're gone, swallowed back into the war's grind. They linger in your memory though, not because they brought relief, but because they made you remember what you'd lost. Their presence cuts through the endless mud and misery, reminding you of a world beyond foxholes and rifles. And sometimes that reminder hurts more than the war itself. The thing about violence in Korea is that it rarely announces itself. Back home, you imagine battles as grand events, lines of soldiers clashing, speeches shouted over the roar of gunfire, trumpets calling men to action. Here, it's never like that. It comes quietly, suddenly, without warning. 1 minute you're marching, your boots crunching over frozen dirt, your mind wandering somewhere else. The next, the air tears open with gunfire, the hillside erupts, and someone near you drops before you even realise you're in a fight. The ambush is what men fear most. It's not the battle you walk into knowingly, it's the one that springs up from nowhere, ripping away any sense of control. You hear a crack, sharp and flat, the unmistakable sound of rifles cutting through the air. Then shouting, screaming, the ground around you exploding as bullets whip past. You hit the dirt automatically, your body slamming into mud or snow, your heart hammering so hard you think it might tear through your chest. You try to think, but thinking doesn't matter anymore. Survival is pure instinct. Your ears ring with the chaos. Gunfire rattles from the ridges, the stutter of machine guns echoing like typewriters of death. Mortars thump, then whistle down, detonating close enough to rattle your bones. Men scream, some with anger, others with pain. Orders are shouted but lost in the noise, leaving you to cling to whatever scraps of training you can recall. Your rifle feels both too heavy and too small in your hands. You squeeze the trigger anyway, blind, firing at flashes on the hill, at shadows that might not even be real. The worst part is how fast it happens. 1 second you're safe enough to breathe, the next the world is tearing itself apart around you. A man next to you takes a round to the chest, jerks once, and is gone before you can even turn your head. Another clutches his leg, blood pumping through his fingers, his voice ragged as he screams for a medic. You want to help, but moving means lifting your head above the dirt, and lifting your head might be the last mistake you make. So you stay down, ears full of his screams, until they cut off. You tell yourself he was saved. Deep down, you know he wasn't. Violence becomes so sudden, so common, that you stop being surprised by it. You march and expect that at any moment, the ridgeline could light up, the trees could crack open, the snow could be painted red. You grip your rifle tighter, eyes darting, heart thudding in your chest. The anxiety never fades, only builds. a coil wound tighter and tighter until you almost want the ambush to come, just so it will finally release. The not knowing is worse than the fight itself. Death comes in strange ways. Sometimes it's quick, merciful almost, a bullet that finds a head or heart before a man even hears the shot. Other times it's drawn out, cruel, a gut wound that leaves him writhing in the mud for hours, begging for water, for morphine, for his mother. You see him go pale, lips dry, eyes glassy until he finally goes still. The silence that follows is heavier than the screams. Ambushes teach you how fragile the line between alive and dead really is. You see men you talked with minutes ago suddenly gone, their bodies twisted, rifles slipping from their hands. Their helmets roll away, bouncing down slopes, as if mocking the fragility of everything. You feel the shock for a second, then you bury it, because if you don't, you'll break apart too. You keep your head down, keep firing, keep breathing. That's all survival is. One breath after another, 1 second at a time. The aftermath is no relief. When the shooting stops, when the echoes fade, you crawl from the dirt and see what's left. Bodies sprawled, some still, some twitching. Faces pale, eyes wide. Blood stains the snow, soaking through coats, pooling in mud. The smell of iron and smoke lingers in your nose, clings to your uniform. You look around, count who's left, and realise how many aren't. Then the order comes to move, and you step past the bodies, boots crunching over what's left of your friends. There's no time to grieve. The march never pauses for death. Even when there isn't an ambush, the threat hangs over you like a storm cloud. You march with your shoulders tight, your ears straining, your eyes scanning every tree line. The silence is worse than noise, because silence means they could be waiting. Every rock could hide a rifle. Every hilltop could conceal a machine gun. You feel exposed no matter where you are, a target painted on your chest, and the constant vigilance drains you more than the marching itself. Some men snap under the pressure. A rustle in the bushes makes them fire wildly, emptying magazines into shadows. A sound in the distance sends them diving for cover, shaking, teeth clenched. Others go numb, staring blankly even when the shooting starts, their bodies moving mechanically, their eyes hollow. You wonder which one you'll become, the one who fires at ghosts, or the one who can't fire at all. Either way, the war wins. Night doesn't save you. Ambushes come in the dark too. Sudden bursts of light and sound that tear apart the blackness. Tracers streak the sky. Mortars flash. Flares drift down and paint everything in ghostly light. The shadows leap and twist, turning trees into enemies, rocks into figures. You fire blindly, heart in your throat, praying you don't run out of ammo before the night ends. And when the light fades, you're left shaking in the cold, staring into the dark, waiting for it to start again. You tell yourself you'll get used to it, but you never do. The violence keeps coming, sudden and sharp, grinding down whatever nerves you have left. Every ambush chips away at you. Every death carves another scar into your mind. You march on, but part of you stays behind, lying in the mud with the men who didn't get back up. And through it all, the war doesn't slow. Orders keep coming. The march continues. The ambushes wait ahead. Violence here isn't the climax of the story, it's the background noise. It doesn't end, it doesn't pause, it doesn't care. You move through it, hoping it misses you this time, knowing it won't forever. Capturing prisoners is never as straightforward as people imagine. Back home, you might picture an enemy soldier dropping his rifle, raising his hands and politely walking into your custody. Out here it's messy, uncertain, and dangerous. Sometimes the man dropping his weapon really does mean surrender. Sometimes he's waiting for you to come close before pulling a hidden grenade. You never know until it's too late, and so your finger stays tight on the trigger, even when you're told to take him alive. The prisoners that do make it through the chaos come in groups, sometimes just one or two, sometimes whole lines of them, shuffling forward with their hands raised. Their faces are hollow, uniforms torn, bodies thin from hunger. They look less like enemies and more like men already half dead, trudging wherever you point them. They don't speak your language, and you don't speak theirs, so everything is gestures and shouting, the tension high because misunderstanding could mean sudden violence. You prod them along with rifle barrels, eyes scanning constantly, never sure if one of them will break from the line. Escorting them feels strange. You march them down muddy paths, your own stomach churning from the same bad rations, your body aching from the same weather. They're enemies, but they're also mirrors, men caught in the same misery, just wearing different uniforms. You catch their eyes sometimes, and it unsettles you, because you see yourself in them, just as tired, just as afraid. But you push that thought down. The war doesn't give you space for sympathy. The camps are worse than the march. Prisoners are herded behind barbed wire, packed into compounds that look more like livestock pens than places for human beings. They huddle together in the cold, wrapped in rags, their breath steaming in the air. Guards pace the perimeter, rifles in hand, eyes sharp. Supplies are short, even for you, so the men behind the wire get even less. Thin soup, scraps of bread, sometimes nothing at all. Disease spreads easily. Lice, dysentery, coughs that turn into something worse. You watch them waste away, powerless to change it, and you tell yourself it's not your problem, but the image lingers. For captured Americans, the story is darker still. Rumours spread about POW camps run by the enemy, places where men vanish and sometimes reappear months later as shells of themselves. You hear about marches north in the dead of winter, men stumbling through snow without proper coats, the weak left to freeze where they fell. You hear about camps where food is nothing but watery gruel, where disease runs unchecked, where beatings and re-education sessions grind men down day after day. You hear about men breaking, signing confessions, reading propaganda into microphones. Not because they believed it, but because starvation and cold gave them no other choice. Some men don't make it out at all. They die in the snow, in the camps, in the silence between interrogations. Others come back, but never fully return, their bodies thin, their eyes empty, their voices flat. They tell their stories in fragments, never the whole thing, as if speaking it out loud makes the pain fresh again. You listen, but part of you doesn't want to, because you know it could be you next time. One wrong step, one unlucky ambush, one order that puts you on the wrong hill, and you'd be the one marched north, the one huddled in rags, the one fading in some compound far from home. And then there are the choices that haunt you. You're told to take prisoners alive, but you know the risks. A man who looks like he's surrendering could be hiding a grenade, could be waiting for the moment when you let your guard down. Some men don't take the risk. Shots ring out before the prisoner even reaches the line. Bodies drop in the mud, and the column marches on as if nothing happened. Other times, Prisoners are taken but never make it to the rear. They vanish on the march, lost in the dark, and no one asks questions. The war strips away rules, leaves only the brutal logic of survival. You wonder what the right choice is, if there even is one. Kill a man who really meant to surrender, and you'll carry that weight forever. Let a man live who is ready to trick you, and you might be the one dead in the mud. Either way, the war makes sure you lose. Prisoners, camps, choices, they all blend into the same picture of misery. No one wins. The captured are broken in body and spirit. The captors are broken in conscience. The war doesn't care. It grinds everyone down the same way, leaves scars on both sides of the wire. You march on, rifle in hand, hoping you'll never see the inside of a camp, praying you'll never have to choose between mercy and survival. But you know the war will put you there eventually, because it puts everyone there eventually. The army runs on orders, and orders run on hierarchy. Out here in Korea, that hierarchy is sharper than a knife. Officers stand above you, not just in rank, but in distance. They give commands, you carry them out. There isn't room for hesitation. There isn't room for argument. The line between obedience and defiance is thin, and crossing it isn't worth the punishment. You learn quickly that questioning orders doesn't save you. It only paints a target on your back from your own side. Most of the time, the orders come down like stones dropped in your lap. March here. Dig there. Hold this position. Patrol that ridge. They're simple on the surface, but each one carries a weight you can feel in your bones. March here means hours of trudging through mud or snow, your legs burning, your back screaming under the weight of gear. Dig there means clawing at frozen ground until your hands blister, trying to carve a hole deep enough to protect you from mortars that don't care about depth. Hold this position means freezing in the dark, eyes straining at the tree line, waiting for an attack that might never come. Every order is another piece of misery wrapped in formality. You don't see where the orders start. They come down through channels, handed from one officer to another, until they reach the sergeant barking at your squad. By the time they hit you, they've been stripped of reasoning, if there ever was any. You don't know why you're marching to that hill, why you're patrolling that road, why you're holding ground that looks like every other patch of dirt you've seen. You just know you were told to do it, so you do it. And when it goes badly, when the ambush comes or the cold eats through your boots, there's no one to ask why. There's just the order and the fact that you followed it. Some officers you respect, even if you don't like them. They march with you, dig beside you, eat the same rations, endure the same cold. They bark orders, but you can hear the strain in their voices, see the weight in their eyes. You know they don't want to send you into hell, but it's their job, and if they don't, someone else will. They look at you like men, not numbers, and that makes it easier to obey. Not easy, but easier. Others are different. They sit higher, further away, far from the mud and the blood. They bark from positions of safety, their uniforms cleaner, their boots drier, their bellies fuller. They send men forward like pieces on a board, and when those men don't come back, they mark it down on paper and move the next piece. To them, you're not a man. You're a rifle, a body, a slot filled. Orders from their mouths feel colder, harder, as if the mud that clings to you never touches them. You learn not to think too hard about it. Thinking is dangerous. If you dwell on the logic of every command, you'll drive yourself mad. Why march across open ground under enemy eyes? Why hold a hill that offers no advantage? Why patrol a stretch of road that's already cost lives 3 times this week? If you ask those questions, you'll see the futility, and futility eats away at discipline. So you bury the questions, focus on your boots, your rifle, the man in front of you. You don't need to know why. You just need to move when told. Disobedience isn't an option. You've seen what happens to men who hesitate, who grumble too loudly, who drag their feet. Punishment comes quick, sharp and merciless. Extra duty, withheld rations, confinement, humiliation. In a place where survival already hangs by a thread, adding punishment on top of it is unbearable. So men obey, even when the orders drag them straight into misery. Sometimes, especially then. But obedience has a cost, one you can't ignore forever. Following orders means stepping over the body of a man you knew, because you were told to advance. It means sitting in a foxhole while frostbite eats your toes, because you were told to hold position. It means firing on shadows in the night, because someone shouted contact and you weren't given the choice to doubt. Each order strips away a piece of yourself, until all that's left is the reflex to move when commanded. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder who's really responsible. If you follow an order that leads to death, is it your fault or the officer's? If the officer is just following orders from above, does the blame climb all the way to the top? Or does it vanish somewhere along the chain, dissolved in bureaucracy, lost in the fog? You never find an answer. You just know that when an order comes, you obey, because not obeying is worse in the moment, even if the obedience breaks you in the long run. The officers carry their own weight, though you rarely see it. They write letters to families, explain deaths they couldn't prevent, justify choices they didn't make. They stand in front of men like you, hiding their own doubts, because doubt is poison in the ranks. Some of them drink too much, smoke too much, stare too long into the distance when they think no one is watching. You wonder if they feel as trapped as you do, locked in the same machine, forced to obey orders from men above them, just as you obey theirs. But the chain of command never bends. It stretches from the top all the way down, unbreakable, merciless. Orders flow like water, and you're at the bottom, drowning in them. There's no space for hesitation, no room for rebellion. You take the words, you carry them out, and you live with the consequences. That's how the army works. That's how the war keeps moving, grinding you down one command at a time. Survival sounds like a reward, but out here it doesn't feel like one. If you're lucky enough to see the end of your tour, if you make it through the cold, the marches, the ambushes, the hunger, and the constant fear, what waits for you isn't relief. It's emptiness, the hollow space left behind when the routine that kept you alive suddenly vanishes. You've lived by orders, by schedules, by the constant pull of danger for so long that when it stops, your body doesn't know what to do. You pack up the same gear you've carried for months, hand in the same rifle that never left your side, and climb aboard a transport that feels too clean, too warm, too quiet. The engine hums. The road stretches out, and the land you bled over begins to disappear behind you. You don't cheer, you don't celebrate. You just sit in silence, staring out at the hills, the rivers, the villages half buried in mud and ash, wondering how they can still exist without you. You wonder if the men you left behind will live to see the same ride. Some won't, and you know it. On the ship or the plane home, the distance grows. The uniforms around you are cleaner, The air smells different. The food tastes almost like food again. But you can't relax. Every sudden noise makes you tense. Every shadow catches your eye. Sleep doesn't come easily. When it does, it's full of the same dreams. Ambushes, foxholes, friends calling out in the dark. You jolt awake, heart pounding, the same as if you were still there. Only now, you're thousands of miles away, and no one around you understands why you're gasping for air in the middle of a calm night. Back home, survival is measured differently. People shake your hand, clap you on the back, call you a hero. They talk about sacrifice, about duty, about pride. You nod, because it's easier than trying to explain what really happened. They don't want to hear about the rations that made you sick, the marches that broke your feet, the friends who bled out in the snow. They want the version of the war that fits neatly into speeches and parades. So you give them that version, even if it feels like lying every time you open your mouth. Family tries to make it easier. They cook the meals you used to love. They sit with you at the table. They smile too much. You want to match their smiles, to sink into the warmth. But it doesn't fit anymore. The food is too rich. The house too quiet. The laughter too fragile. You sit at the table, fork in hand, and all you can think about is tin cans and cigarettes. You lie in your old bed, and all you can hear is the sound of mortars in the distance. Home is the same, but you're not. And the difference cuts sharper than any wound you carried back. The war leaves marks that don't show. Your body heals. The frostbite fades. The blisters turn to calluses. The cough eventually eases. But your mind doesn't patch over so easily. The faces of the dead drift into your thoughts when you're least prepared. The sound of gunfire echoes in the back of your head when a car backfires. The smell of smoke and metal comes rushing back with the smallest spark. You hide it because no one wants to see it, but it never goes away. It clings to you like the dirt in Korea, impossible to scrub off. Work, family, routine. You try to slip back into them, but they feel unnatural. Standing in a crowded store, you feel exposed, every aisle a potential ambush. Sitting in a quiet room, you feel restless, waiting for orders that never come. You catch yourself scanning rooftops, watching tree lines, listening for sounds that aren't there. People tell you to relax, to enjoy peace, but peace feels foreign, like a language you can't speak anymore. Some men turn to drink, others to silence. You see them at reunions, in bars, sitting alone with their cigarettes. They don't talk much, but when they do, it's always about career. Even if the words are clipped, half finished, scattered, you realise you're the same. No matter how far you get from those hills, from those foxholes, from the endless grind of orders and rations, part of you never leaves. Survival doesn't mean escape. It just means carrying the weight longer. And sometimes you wonder if lucky is even the right word. You lived, yes. But living means remembering. Living means carrying the faces, the sounds, the smells, the endless days of misery. The men who didn't survive don't have to remember any of it. You do. You wake each morning with the war still lodged in your chest, and you carry it into every day that follows. Survival is its own burden, heavier than the gear you once marched with, heavier than the rifle you once clutched. You can't set it down. You just keep carrying it, step after step, for the rest of your life. Coming home sounds like the end of everything you endured, but the moment your boots touch familiar ground, you realise it isn't an ending at all. The noise is different, the air smells different, the faces are familiar, but none of it fits the way it used to. You stand in a train station or on a street you once knew by heart, and it feels like a place you've never been before. People hurry past, voices raised, laughter spilling from open doors, and you're stuck in the middle, still listening for sounds of gunfire that never come. Your family greets you with smiles too wide, hugs too long, voices breaking with joy. They talk over each other, filling the silence with words, desperate to make up for all the months lost. You hold them, nod, smile where you can, but inside you feel detached, as though you're watching it all from a distance. Their relief is real, but yours doesn't come. You want to match their happiness, but what you feel is a dull ache that doesn't ease no matter how hard you try. They've been living life without you, and it shows in 100 small ways. Rooms rearranged, routines shifted, inside jokes you don't understand anymore. They tell stories about birthdays, holidays, quiet evenings, and you sit there silent, realizing you weren't part of any of it. You're a guest in your own home, welcomed warmly but never fully belonging. They expect you to settle back in as if nothing has changed, but everything has. The world moved on while you were stuck in the mud and snow, and now you're out of step, stumbling to catch up. Work feels the same way. You clock in, take orders, go through the motions, but the rhythm is too simple, too quiet. After months of tension, of being wound tight every moment, the stillness grates. You miss nothing about the war, but the absence of danger leaves a hole. You find yourself restless, impatient, snapping at small frustrations. Your body is home, but your head is still in Korea, scanning ridgelines, waiting for orders, bracing for the next march. No job, no matter how steady, fills that gap. The people around you don't understand, and you learn quickly not to explain. They ask questions, but they don't really want answers. They want stories that are easy to digest, ones that match what they imagine. If you tell them the truth about hunger, about disease, about the faces of men torn apart in ambushes, they grow uncomfortable, their smiles falter, their eyes dart away. So you stop telling them. You give them pieces instead, little fragments softened into something they can swallow. They call you brave, they thank you for your service, and you nod, swallowing the urge to say what's really on your mind. At night, the quiet doesn't bring peace. It brings the memories back sharper than ever. You lie in your own bed, sheets clean, roof solid, and still your heart races when a car backfires outside. You wake drenched in sweat, convinced for a moment that you're still in a foxhole, that the ambush is just seconds away. The room slowly comes into focus, but the fear doesn't fade. You sit on the edge of the bed, head in your hands, listening to the silence until morning finally comes. Some days you wander through town and notice how alive everything feels. Children playing, couples walking, people laughing without a second thought. You envy them, but you also feel apart from them, as if you've crossed into another world and can never fully return. You nod politely, exchange pleasantries, but inside you're still on the other side of the ocean, marching through snow, smoking through boredom, clutching letters like lifelines. The friendships you built in the war feel closer than any you have at home. The men who shared your misery, who shivered in the same foxholes, who carried the same unbearable weight, they're the only ones who truly know. When you see them again, the conversations are short, the words clipped, but the understanding is immediate. No explanations, no awkward silences, just the unspoken knowledge that you all carry the same scars. You hold on to that because it's the only place you still feel understood. Surviving the war was supposed to mean returning to the life you left, but the truth is there's no way back. The life you had ended the day you first stepped off the transport in Korea, the person who lived it isn't the same one who came home. You walk the same streets, sit in the same rooms, eat at the same table, but you can't shake the feeling that you're only visiting a stranger moving through a life that once belonged to you. Coming home isn't really coming home. It's starting over in a place that looks familiar but feels foreign, carrying the weight of memories no one else can see, trying to fit into spaces that no longer match your shape. The war doesn't stay behind. It follows you, silent and heavy, into every corner of the life you thought you'd get back. And no matter how far you try to leave it, it never lets you go. You've made it this far, through the cold, the hunger, the endless marches, the sudden violence, and the silence that followed it all. You've seen what it meant to wake up in Korea, to live in the mud, to eat from tin cans, to carry weight that never eased. You've felt what survival really was, and what it cost when the fighting finally stopped. Coming home didn't erase the war. It only gave you new ground to carry it on. There's no neat ending, no tidy lesson, no moment where the misery fades into something noble. The men who went through Korea didn't walk away with glory. They walked away with scars, with memories, with a kind of exhaustion that doesn't leave even decades later. They endured because there was no other choice, because surviving the next hour was the only goal, and then the next and the next until suddenly the war was behind them, but never really gone. So now, as you lie back in your bed, safe and warm, listening to the quiet hum around you, let that weight slip away. You don't have to march anymore. You don't have to freeze or starve or wait for the next ambush. You've walked through it in your mind, and that's far enough. Let your eyes grow heavy, let the noise fade, and let yourself rest, knowing you've made it through a world most would never endure. Sleep now. The war is far away.